Picture an empire so vast its influence stretched from the sun-scorched sands of Egypt to the rugged mountains of India, a realm where legendary kings commanded armies of millions and built cities that glittered with unimaginable wealth. This was the Persian Empire, one of history's most formidable and fascinating civilizations, a superpower whose legacy is etched not just in history books, but in the physical objects it left behind. These aren't just relics gathering dust in a museum case, they are whispers from a distant past, each one a piece of a grand puzzle waiting to be solved. For centuries, these artifacts have held their secrets close, but today, we're going on a journey to listen to what they have to say, to uncover the truths hidden in gold, stone, and clay that challenge everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. Our adventure will take us deep into the heart of this lost world as we explore 30 of the most intriguing artifacts from ancient Persia. We will hold in our hands, so to speak, the very objects that kings touched, that artisans labored over for a lifetime, and that witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties. These are not merely beautiful things, they are time capsules. A simple clay tablet can reveal the meticulous accounts of a sprawling bureaucracy, while an intricately carved cylinder seal can tell a story of myth and power that resonates across millennia. A glimmering piece of jewelry might speak of incredible craftsmanship and far-flung trade routes, and a weapon, still sharp after thousands of years, can tell a silent, violent tale of conquest and empire. Each artifact is a key, and together they can unlock a more vibrant, complex, and human picture of a civilization often shrouded in the mists of time and the biases of its rivals. So prepare to have your perception of history challenged and your sense of wonder ignited. We are about to piece together a story of incredible engineering, profound spirituality, and breathtaking artistry. We will see how the Persians saw the world, how they governed, how they worshipped, and how they lived. This is more than a list of objects. It is a detective story, an archaeological adventure that promises to reveal secrets long buried. From the majestic heights of Persepolis to the depths of a royal tomb, we will uncover the evidence that brings this magnificent empire back to life, piece by fascinating piece. The journey into the mystery begins now, and where better to begin our investigation than with an object that has fundamentally shaped our modern understanding of Persian rule, an artifact so revolutionary it has been called the first bill of human rights. We start with the Cyrus Cylinder. Imagine the scene in 1879 as archaeologists sifted through the ancient ruins of Babylon. Their shovels didn't strike gold or jewels, but a rather modest baked clay object about the size of a rugby ball. It was covered in dense, wedge-shaped markings, cuneiform script. This unassuming cylinder would turn out to be one of the most significant political declarations ever unearthed. It was commissioned by none other than Cyrus the Great, the founder of the vast Achaemenid Persian Empire, following his conquest of Babylon in 539 BC. But this was no typical victory monument, no boastful list of slaughtered enemies or destroyed cities. Instead, it presents something extraordinary for its time, a philosophy of governance. The inscription on the cylinder tells a story of liberation, not subjugation. Cyrus details how he overthrew the last Babylonian king, whom he portrays as a tyrant. But then, he makes a series of stunning pronouncements. He declares that he will allow the diverse peoples living within his new empire to practice their own religions freely. He claims to have freed captive populations held in Babylon, specifically mentioning the Jews, and to have supported their return to their homeland and the rebuilding of their temple in Jerusalem. This act is corroborated by the Hebrew Bible, which hails Cyrus as a Messiah, an anointed one of God. The cylinder portrays Cyrus not as a ruthless conqueror, but as a divinely chosen ruler who restores order and honors the local gods of the lands he now controls. It speaks of repairing cities and restoring cults, a policy of tolerance and integration that was virtually unheard of in the ancient world, where the standard practice was often brutal assimilation or eradication. Of course, such a powerful symbol is not without its controversies. Modern scholars engage in lively debate about how to interpret the cylinder. Some caution against viewing it through a purely modern lens, arguing that while its policies were enlightened, it was still a tool of political propaganda. Cyrus needed to legitimize his rule to the powerful priestly class of Babylon and ensure stability in a critical province. His tolerance was as much brilliant pragmatism as it was moral philosophy. Others point out that the concept of human rights as we understand it today didn't exist in the ancient world. Yet, even with these nuanced perspectives, the cylinder's core message is undeniable. It represents a profound shift, a move away from the Assyrian model of terror and domination toward a Persian ideal of a multinational, multicultural empire held together by respect for local traditions. Today, the Cyrus Cylinder is a powerful national symbol for Iran, and a replica even resides at the United Nations headquarters in New York, standing as a timeless testament to the ancient roots of ideas about freedom, diversity, and compassionate leadership. It's a fitting starting point, showing us that the Persian Empire was built on an idea far more durable than mere military strength. While the Cyrus Cylinder gave us a profound insight into the mind of a Persian king, our next artifact offers a breathtaking glimpse into the dazzling material world his empire created. We now turn to the Oxus Treasure, a collection so spectacular it seems to capture the very essence of Persian luxury and power. The story of its discovery sounds like something from an adventure novel. In the late 19th century, somewhere along the banks of the Oxus River in what is now Tajikistan, a group of merchants stumbled upon a trove of gold and silver objects. They had found a hoard that had been carefully buried, likely to hide it from invading armies over 2,000 years earlier, but their journey to safety was fraught with danger. The merchants were reportedly captured by bandits and the treasure was scattered. It was only through the dramatic intervention of a British army captain who reportedly bought the remaining pieces from local villagers and ensured their safe passage to the British Museum that this priceless collection was saved from being melted down for bullion. What survives today is a stunning assembly of Achaemenid Persian metalwork dating from around the 5th and 4th centuries BC. This wasn't the property of a single tomb like Tutankhamun's, but rather a collection of votive offerings, perhaps made to a temple, representing the highest levels of craftsmanship from across the empire. The treasure includes everything from delicate gold plaques and detailed statuettes to heavy silver drinking vessels and intricate personal ornaments. Each piece speaks of a society with immense wealth and a highly sophisticated aesthetic sense. To hold one of these objects, even in your imagination, is to connect with the pinnacle of Persian elite culture. Among the most captivating items is a model gold chariot, a miniature masterpiece no bigger than your hand. It's incredibly detailed, pulled by 4 tiny horses and carrying 2 figures, a driver and a nobleman, who is most likely a satrap, a provincial governor of the empire. The chariot is a symbol of mobility, authority, and status. But look closer, and you see the incredible artistry, the careful rendering of the horses' manes, the spoked wheels, the texture on the figure's clothing. This wasn't just a toy, it was probably a valuable religious offering, a representation of power given as a gift to the gods. It tells us that the empire's elite moved in style, and that their symbols of authority were worthy of divine presentation. Then there are the armlets, which are truly show-stopping pieces of jewelry. These are not delicate, subtle bracelets. They are substantial, heavy gold torques meant to be worn on the upper arm, terminating in fierce, stylized griffin heads, mythical creatures with the bodies of lions and the beaks and wings of eagles. The griffin was a potent symbol throughout the ancient Near East, representing divine power and protection. The sheer weight of the gold and the complexity of the granulation work, a technique where tiny gold beads are fused to a surface to create texture and pattern, show and technical skill that is simply astonishing. Wearing these, a Persian noble would have been a walking display of wealth, power, and connection to the mythical world. They are not just adornments, they are proclamations. The Oxus Treasure as a whole serves as a powerful counterpoint to the philosophical ideals of the Cyrus Cylinder. Here we see the tangible results of that empire building, the accumulated riches, the flourishing of arts and crafts, and the personal luxury enjoyed by its ruling class. It provides undeniable proof of the vast trade networks and economic prosperity that such a large, well-administered empire could generate. Gold from Egypt and Nubia, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and skilled artisans from every corner of the realm all came together to produce objects of timeless beauty. This treasure doesn't just illustrate wealth, it demonstrates a unified artistic language that helped bind a vast and diverse empire together, a visual culture of power that was recognizable from the banks of the Oxus River all the way to the palaces of Persepolis. If the Cyrus Cylinder presents a philosophy of benevolent rule and the Oxus Treasure reveals the empire's stunning material wealth, our next artifact stands as a monumental proclamation of raw power and political necessity. Carved into the face of a towering limestone cliff along a critical ancient trade route in modern-day Iran is the Behistun Inscription, a breathtaking feat of engineering and propaganda commissioned by King Darius the Great. To stand at the base of this cliff is to feel a sense of awe and intimidation, for the message here was not meant to be easily accessible. It was designed to be seen from a distance, a permanent reminder of the king's authority that dominated the landscape. The scale is almost unimaginable. The relief and text are carved more than 300 feet above the ground on a near-vertical rock face, requiring the sculptors to work from precarious scaffolding, removing any rock that might allow a climber to reach it. This was a statement meant to last for eternity, safe from the vandalism of man and the erosion of time. The visual scene is dramatic and purposeful. It shows Darius larger than life, with his left foot placed firmly on the chest of a figure lying on his back, the usurper Gaumata, whom Darius defeated to claim the throne. Behind Darius stand two of his loyal courtiers, armed with a bow and a spear, their presence reinforcing his legitimacy. Before him, in a line, kneel 9 other rebel kings, their hands bound behind their backs and ropes around their necks, each one representing a challenge to his rule that was decisively crushed. Above this entire tableau hovers the Pharaoh, the symbol of the Zoroastrian god Ahura Mazda, whose outstretched wing blesses Darius's reign, providing the divine sanction for his actions. This is not a subtle piece of art. It is a stark declaration of victory, order, and divine right, a powerful visual argument for Darius's legitimacy aimed at any traveler or potential rebel who passed beneath it. But the true, world-changing significance of Behistun lies not just in its imagery, but in its words. Darius didn't just carve a picture, he told his story in 3 different languages: Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. This trilingual text, which recounts his rise to power and his numerous military victories in meticulous detail, would become the key that unlocked the ancient world. For centuries, the meaning of cuneiform script had been completely lost to humanity. The wedge-shaped markings on clay tablets and stone monuments were silent, their stories inaccessible. The Behistun Inscription, with its same text repeated in 3 known but undeciphered scripts, became the Rosetta Stone of Mesopotamia. In the 19th century, intrepid linguists and soldiers, most notably Sir Henry Rawlinson, took enormous risks to scale the cliff and make papier-mâché casts of the inscriptions. By painstakingly comparing the 3 versions, starting with the known royal names in Old Persian, scholars were able to crack the code of cuneiform. This decipherment was a revolution. It was as if a vast library, sealed for millennia, was suddenly thrown open. The Behistun Inscription didn't just tell us about Darius's specific campaign. it gave us the grammar and vocabulary to read everything else. Through this key, we gained access to the Epic of Gilgamesh, the law code of Hammurabi, the business records of Mesopotamian merchants, and the diplomatic letters of forgotten empires. The propaganda of one king became the gateway to understanding all of ancient Near Eastern civilization. We must read Darius's account with a critical eye, of course, for it is his version of events, a carefully crafted narrative designed to justify what was essentially a coup. He presents himself as the rightful heir, purging the empire of a fraudulent ruler and his rebellious allies, chosen by Ahura Mazda to restore order. Yet, even with its biases, the inscription provides an incredibly detailed, first-hand account of the chaotic first year of his reign, offering names, places, and events that have allowed historians to reconstruct a critical period in Persian history. The Behistun Inscription is therefore a dual wonder, an immense piece of political theater frozen in stone, and the very tool that allowed us to finally hear the whispers of countless other artifacts, bringing an entire lost world back to life. But if the Behistun Inscription gives us the grand, official narrative of the king, our next discovery offers a truly intimate counterpoint: the bustling, noisy, and wonderfully human reality of running that empire day by day. This comes to us not from a majestic cliff face, but from a storage room. We are talking about the Persepolis fortification tablets, a staggering archive of administrative records that transforms our view of the Persian Empire from a monolithic power into a living, breathing organism. The story of their discovery is almost as fascinating as the contents themselves. In the 1930s, archaeologists excavating the magnificent ceremonial capital of Persepolis made a remarkable find. Within the fortified walls of the city, they uncovered two small rooms that had been carefully sealed off. Inside, they didn't find gold or jewels, but something arguably more valuable: tens of thousands of clay tablets and fragments. These weren't the grand royal decrees you might expect from the heart of an empire. They were the paperwork, the receipts, the travel vouchers, and the payroll records of a massive bureaucracy. They were the empire's filing cabinet, and it had been preserved for over 2 millennia. The sheer scale of this archive is difficult to comprehend. We are dealing with a collection that numbers in the tens of thousands, a vast trove of information that chronicles a relatively short period, roughly from 509 to 494 BC, during the reigns of Darius the Great and his early successors. What makes these tablets so special is their focus. They document the flow of food and other commodities in the region immediately surrounding Persepolis. This was the inner workings of the imperial machine, recorded in meticulous detail by an army of scribes using the Elamite language and cuneiform script. Because of the decipherment of other texts like Behistun, scholars have been able to read these records, and they reveal an empire obsessed with organization, accountability, and the welfare of its people, from the highest noble to the most humble laborer. Let's picture the scene these tablets describe. A caravan of workers arrives from a distant province to contribute their labor to the ongoing construction of the magnificent palaces and terraces of Persepolis. They don't work for free. The tablets record the precise rations issued to them, specific amounts of barley, beer, wine, or even sheep, based on their sex, their role, and even whether they were traveling with children. We see the names of individual workers, the officials who authorized the payments, and the locations where the goods were distributed. It's a detailed payroll system that ensured the massive workforce was fed and compensated, a logistical feat that speaks to a highly advanced and surprisingly humane administrative state. This isn't the story of enslaved masses driven by the whip, but of a structured economy where labor was recognized and rewarded. The tablets also pull back the curtain on the incredible logistics of feeding the royal court and its endless stream of visitors. Delegations from every corner of the empire, from Egypt, Lydia, Babylon, and India, would travel to Persepolis to pay homage to the King of Kings. The fortification tablets track the provisions allocated to these dignitaries as they journeyed along the royal roads, staying at way stations controlled by the state. They received food and drink commensurate with their status, a practice that was both a gesture of hospitality and a calculated political act, reinforcing the hierarchy and generosity of the Persian crown. We can almost see the bustling storerooms and busy accountants, managing a complex economy of grain, livestock, and luxury goods that sustain the political life of the empire. Perhaps most importantly, these records are profoundly humanizing. They give us the names of ordinary people, the carpenters, the stonecutters, the cooks, and the accountants who are otherwise completely absent from the grand monuments and royal inscriptions. We learn about a woman named Erdabama, a remarkably wealthy and powerful landowner who controlled vast estates and a huge workforce, including skilled craftworkers. She appears frequently in the tablets, receiving and distributing large quantities of grain and wine, suggesting a level of female economic independence and influence that challenges our simplified views of ancient societies. The Persepolis fortification tablets don't just tell us about the empire, they introduce us to its citizens. They reveal the intricate web of relationships, the careful accounting, and the daily rhythms that made the immense Persian Empire not just a conqueror, but a functioning, complex society. It is through these thousands of humble clay receipts that we can finally hear the faint, collective hum of life in one of the ancient world's greatest civilizations. Now we move from the bustling administrative life of Persepolis to a place of profound silence and reverence, a lone structure standing on the vast plain of Pasargadae. This is the tomb of Cyrus the Great, a monument whose stark simplicity speaks volumes more than any ornate palace ever could. After the grandeur of the Apadana and the intricate records of the fortification tablets, the tomb offers a humbling contrast. It is here, in this remote and windswept location, that the legendary founder of the Persian Empire is said to have been laid to rest. The structure itself is a masterpiece of understated power. It's not large or overly complex. Instead, it's a perfectly proportioned stone chamber sitting atop a steep, six-tiered base, rising to a total height of about 35 feet. The gabled roof is simple and unmistakable. What's immediately striking is its architectural language. It doesn't look like the grand, rock-cut tombs of later Persian kings at Naqsh-e-Rostam. Instead, its design echoes the funerary traditions of earlier civilizations, particularly the Eurasians and the Lydians, with strong influences from Greek architecture. This tells us something crucial about Cyrus himself. He was a synthesizer, a unifier who drew upon the cultural currents of the entire region to create something new and distinctly Persian. This wasn't just a tomb, it was a statement of an emerging identity, built with stones borrowed from the very peoples he had united. The historical accounts that surround this tomb are as compelling as its architecture. Perhaps the most famous story comes from the Greek historian Arrian, who recounts that when Alexander the Great, the conqueror who would ultimately topple the Persian Empire, arrived at Pasargadae, he made a special pilgrimage to the tomb of Cyrus. The story goes that Alexander found the tomb had been desecrated by looters and was furious. He ordered its immediate restoration, punishing those responsible. He then paid his respects to the memory of the great king. Whether this story is entirely accurate or not, its persistence is significant. It shows that even for his greatest adversary, Cyrus represented an ideal of kingship worthy of honor. Alexander's alleged act transforms the tomb from merely a Persian monument into a universal symbol of respect for a foundational leader, a bridge between two competing empires. It underscores the almost mythical status Cyrus held even centuries after his death. Yet for all its symbolic power, the tomb holds onto many of its secrets tightly. The most tantalizing mystery is, of course, what was originally inside. Ancient sources, like the Greek writer Strabo, describe a golden coffin, a lavish couch, and a table set with precious vessels. They mention an inscription that supposedly read, "O man, I am Cyrus, who founded the empire of the Persians and was king of Asia. Grudge me not, therefore, this monument." However, when archaeologists first gained access to the interior in modern times, they found it utterly empty. Was it looted in antiquity, perhaps before Alexander's arrival? Was it stripped during periods of turmoil, or were the ancient accounts exaggerated? We may never know what treasures, if any, accompanied Cyrus on his final journey. This emptiness, however, adds to the tomb's powerful aura. It forces us to focus not on the material wealth that was lost, but on the enduring legacy of the man it commemorates. The void inside speaks to the inevitable passage of time, while the enduring stone structure outside speaks to the immortality of a great vision. Today, the tomb of Cyrus stands as one of Iran's most powerful national symbols. It has survived earthquakes, invasions, and the rise and fall of dynasties for over 2,500 years. Its simple, robust form has become an icon of Persian heritage and resilience. In its quiet dignity, it perfectly reflects the qualities attributed to Cyrus by history: strength without arrogance, power tempered with wisdom. It is a monument that doesn't shout its importance but simply commands respect through its enduring presence. Unlike the communal grandeur of the Apadana, this is a profoundly personal monument, a final resting place that connects us directly to the individual who started it all. It reminds us that behind the vast machinery of empire, the intricate bureaucracy, and the stunning works of art, there was a person whose vision set history on a new course. The tomb is a silent sentinel, guarding not just a memory, but the very origin point of a world-changing idea. Yet for all the grandeur of royal tombs and administrative centers, our next discovery forces us to expand our map of Persian influence far beyond the imperial heartland, into the frozen reaches of Siberia. Here, in a high valley of the Altai Mountains, archaeologists made one of the most astonishing finds of the 20th century, the Pazyryk carpet. This wasn't a discovery in a sun-baked ruin, but in a burial mound, a kurgan, that had been sealed for over 2,500 years. The secret to its miraculous preservation was ice. Water had seeped into the tomb and frozen solid, creating a natural time capsule that protected its contents from decay. When Soviet archaeologists excavated these kurgans in the 1940s, they found not just human remains, but an entire frozen world, including wood, textiles, and most famously, a large, intricately woven carpet perfectly preserved. And this is where the mystery deepens, for this carpet, found thousands of miles from Persia, is almost certainly a product of the Achaemenid Empire. To call it a carpet is almost an understatement. It is a masterpiece of textile art. Measuring about 6 feet by 6.5 feet, it is the world's oldest known example of a knotted pile carpet. The sophistication is staggering. It contains an incredible 360 hand-tied knots per square inch, a density and quality that rivals the finest rugs produced centuries later. The design is a complex series of concentric borders surrounding a field of repeating geometric motifs. The outer border shows a procession of fallow deer, elegantly stylized. The next border inward depicts a line of griffins, those mythical eagle-lion hybrids we saw in the Oxus Treasure, symbols of power and the divine. Then, most intriguingly, an inner border shows riders on horseback, some dismounted, leading their steeds. The attention to detail is breathtaking. You can see the patterns on the horses' blankets and the distinctive clothing of the riders. This level of artistry points unequivocally to a highly developed, centralized workshop tradition, and all evidence leads back to Persia. The artistic motifs, particularly the griffins and the precise, hierarchical composition, are classic hallmarks of Achaemenid design, seen on the reliefs at Persepolis and on precious metalwork. The very concept of such an elaborate, finely knotted carpet fits perfectly with historical descriptions of the incredible luxury of the Persian court. Greek historians wrote of the sumptuous fabrics that adorned Persian palaces, and the Persian carpet is the tangible proof of that legendary craftsmanship. Which brings us to the captivating central question: how did this magnificent Persian carpet end up frozen in a chieftain's tomb in the distant Siberian mountains? The Persian people were Scythian nomads, renowned as skilled horsemen and fearsome warriors, but not as master weavers of complex pile carpets. The most compelling explanation is trade, specifically the long-distance exchange networks that connected the ancient world in ways we are only beginning to appreciate. This carpet was likely an incredibly valuable luxury good, acquired by the Scythian chieftain either through direct trade or as a diplomatic gift. The Altai Mountains were not an isolated backwater. They were a crossroads on the early Silk Road, a conduit for goods moving between China, Central Asia, and the Near East. A Persian caravan or a series of middlemen could have transported this treasure north, where it became a supreme status symbol for a local ruler, significant enough to be buried with him for the afterlife. Another, more dramatic theory suggests the carpet was war booty. The Scythians and the Persians had a complicated relationship, sometimes engaging in trade, other times in conflict. King Darius I himself led a major, though largely unsuccessful, campaign against the European Scythians. It is plausible that a northern Scythian tribe, perhaps through a raid on a Persian settlement or an outpost, seized the carpet as a prize. Whether a gift of diplomacy or a trophy of war, the Persian carpet stands as silent but powerful testimony to the vast reach of Persian culture and commerce. It demonstrates that the influence of the empire was not confined by its political borders. Its artistic language and luxury objects traveled along invisible highways, carrying Persian aesthetics to the very edges of the known world. This single piece of woven wool challenges any simplistic notion of ancient isolation, painting a picture of a surprisingly interconnected world where a nomad in Siberia could possess an object born in the heart of a distant empire. Continuing our journey through the crossroads of empire, we now encounter an artifact that perfectly embodies the Persian talent for cultural synthesis, a statue that stands as a testament to the fact that real power often lies in adaptation, not just domination. Discovered not in Persia itself, but at the ancient capital of Susa, the life-size statue of Darius the Great is a masterpiece of political messaging carved from dark, polished grey-wacky stone. At first glance, you might be forgiven for thinking you're looking at an Egyptian pharaoh. The figure stands in a classic Egyptian pose, 1 foot forward, arms rigidly at its sides, clutching what are known as cylinder objects, symbols of kingship. He wears a simple kilt, and on his head rests the traditional Egyptian royal headdress, the nemes, with a protective uraeus cobra coiled at the brow. Every line and proportion adheres to the strict, timeless conventions of Egyptian royal sculpture, designed to project an eternal, god-like authority. This was the visual language of power that the people of Egypt understood and respected. But a closer inspection reveals a fascinating duality, a clever layering of Persian identity onto this Egyptian form. The figure's face, while stylized, is not the generic visage of a typical pharaoh. It bears the distinct, finely carved features of Darius himself, with his characteristic curly beard and stern, intelligent expression, features we recognize from the reliefs at Persepolis and Behistun. This is the first clue that this is more than just an Egyptian statue. The true revelation, however, is found on the base of the statue and the supports behind the legs. Here, the surface is covered not with hieroglyphs praising Egyptian gods, but with a detailed trilingual inscription. The text is repeated in the 3 official languages of the Persian Empire: Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. And then, adding a 4th layer, it is also inscribed in Egyptian hieroglyphs. This is a truly global monument, designed to be read and understood by the diverse subjects of a vast kingdom. The content of the inscriptions is a brilliant piece of geopolitical rhetoric. In them, Darius does not present himself as a foreign conqueror lording over a subdued province. Instead, he adopts the full mantle of pharaonic legitimacy. He lists the traditional titles of an Egyptian king, declaring himself the son of the gods Neith and Atum, the rightful ruler chosen to maintain the Egyptian concept of cosmic order and justice. He recounts in the hieroglyphic text how the god Atum himself granted him all the lands of the earth, in which the sun shines, effectively framing the entire Persian Empire as a divine gift bestowed through the lens of Egyptian theology. This was a breathtaking act of political assimilation. Darius wasn't merely tolerating Egyptian religion, he was actively participating in it, positioning himself as the latest in a long, unbroken line of pharaohs whose primary duty was to honor the gods and protect the land. For the Egyptian priesthood and populace, this was a powerful signal that their world, their beliefs, and their social structures would be upheld, not overturned. The statue's very presence in Susa, the Persian administrative capital, adds another layer of meaning. It was likely commissioned to stand in a prominent temple or palace complex, a permanent symbol of the empire's reach and inclusivity. But it also speaks to the incredible mobility of ideas and artisans in the ancient world. The Greywacke stone itself was quarried in Egypt, and the statue was almost certainly carved by skilled Egyptian sculptors, perhaps even transported hundreds of miles to its final home. This wasn't just plunder, it was a deliberate commission, an investment in a specific kind of propaganda. The statue of Darius tells a story of an empire confident enough in its own identity to borrow freely from others, to wrap itself in the sacred garments of conquered cultures in order to solidify its rule. It shows us that the Achaemenid strategy of governance was not a one-size-fits-all model, but a flexible, intelligent approach that understood legitimacy is often local. In this single, elegant sculpture, we see the Persian Empire not as a foreign monolith, but as a multicultural entity that knew the power of speaking to its subjects in their own visual and spiritual language. From the solemn stone of Darius's statue, we now step into the vibrant, sensory world of the royal court, a realm of sound, scent, and spectacle where power was performed through lavish hospitality. And at the very heart of these opulent feasts was an object designed to dazzle and intimidate the Rhyton. These were not ordinary cups or goblets. They were magnificent ceremonial drinking vessels, masterpieces of the silversmiths' and goldsmiths' art that transformed the simple act of drinking into a powerful political ritual. Imagine the scene within the grand halls of Persepolis, the air thick with the smell of roasting meat and exotic perfumes, the sound of musicians and diplomats from a dozen different nations conversing. And at the center of it all, the King of Kings, presiding over a feast that was as much about diplomacy as it was about sustenance. When wine was served, it was not poured from a simple jug. Instead, a servant would approach, holding aloft a breathtaking Rhyton. The typical Achaemenid Rhyton was a work of art in two distinct parts. The upper section was a conical drinking horn, often fluted or decorated with intricate patterns. But it was the lower portion that truly captured the imagination. This was the protome, the forepart of a powerful or mythical animal crafted in stunning detail. The horn would end in a spout, often at the animal's chest, and the drinker would have to place a finger over this spout to fill their cup, releasing it to allow the wine to flow. This very action required a certain dexterity and grace, turning the consumption of alcohol into a performative skill. The animals chosen for these protomes were deeply symbolic. You would see rams symbolizing royal power and fertility, lions representing strength and courage, and most spectacularly, griffins, those eagle-lioned guardians of the divine, connecting the king's rule to the realm of the gods. A famous example, a gold griffin-headed Rhyton, showcases this incredible artistry. The griffin's head is rendered with ferocious beauty, its curved beak open, its eyes once likely inlaid with precious stones, its muscular neck covered with detailed feathers and scales. To hold such an object was to hold a piece of the mythical world. The function of these Rhytons extended far beyond mere utility. In the context of the royal banquet, they were instruments of propaganda. When an ambassador from Greece or a satrap from Bactria was handed a rhyton filled with wine, they were being given a tactile demonstration of Persian wealth and technological prowess. The weight of the solid silver or gold, the cool touch of the metal, the sheer brilliance of the craftsmanship, this was a message that needed no translation. It communicated that an empire capable of producing such objects for everyday use, albeit a highly ceremonial everyday, was an empire of unimaginable resources and sophistication. The rhyton was a portable piece of imperial treasure, a symbol of the king's generosity and his ability to command the finest artisans from across his domains. The act of drinking from it created a bond, however temporary, between the monarch and his guest, a bond sealed by shared wine and the unspoken understanding of the power dynamics at play. These vessels also played a crucial role in what historians call the Persian culture of gift-giving. The exchange of precious objects was a fundamental part of maintaining the political relationships that held the empire together. A loyal satrap might be rewarded with a set of silver rhytons, a tangible sign of the king's favor that would elevate the governor's status in his own province. Conversely, a rhyton offered as a gift to a foreign ambassador was a strategic tool, an attempt to awe and influence a representative of a rival power. The value was not just in the material, but in the cultural statement it made. It was a piece of Persia itself, an artifact that carried the empire's aesthetic and ideology into distant courts. The rhytons of Persepolis, therefore, were more than beautiful dishes. They were active participants in the theater of power, essential props in the ritualized performances that maintained the social and political order of one of the ancient world's greatest empires. Shifting our focus from the grand spectacles of the royal court to the very foundations of the empire itself, we encounter an artifact that is deceptively simple in appearance but monumental in its implications. Our next object is the Ekbatana gold tablet, a tiny, unassuming rectangle of gold no larger than the palm of your hand, discovered not in a formal excavation but reportedly found by a local farmer near the ancient site of Ekbatana, the summer capital of the Medes and later the Persians. This tablet's significance lies entirely in the 7 short lines of cuneiform text inscribed upon it. The inscription claims it was commissioned by a man named Ariramnes, who declares himself a king, the son of Taspes, and the grandfather of the great Cyrus the Great. If authentic, this little piece of gold would be a priceless treasure, a rare and direct written record from the very dawn of the Achaemenid dynasty, shedding light on the shadowy early genealogy of Persia's ruling family before they built their world empire. It promises to fill a critical gap in our knowledge, connecting the legendary figures of Persian history with tangible, contemporary evidence. The text on the tablet is a classic royal declaration, a statement of lineage and legitimacy. Ariramnes announces his kingship and his ancestry, placing himself in a direct line of succession that would culminate in his grandson, Cyrus. This is incredibly important because our main sources for this early period are the later accounts of Greek historians like Herodotus, who wrote generations after the events they described, and the grand inscriptions of later kings like Darius the Great, who had their own political reasons for presenting a particular version of the family tree. A contemporary document from an earlier, less documented time would be like finding a missing puzzle piece, allowing historians to cross-reference and verify the stories that have come down to us. It would help confirm the relationships between early Achaemenid figures like Taspes, Cyrus I, and Cambyses I, providing a firmer foundation for the dynasty's rise from regional rulers to emperors. The tablet transforms these names from semi-legendary figures in a genealogy into historical actors who commissioned inscriptions and claimed royal titles. However, the story of the Ekbatana gold tablet is not one of clear confirmation, but rather a captivating scholarly detective story filled with doubt and debate. Almost from the moment it surfaced, the tablet's authenticity was called into question. The circumstances of its discovery are murky. It wasn't found by archaeologists in a controlled dig with a clear context, but rather appeared on the antiquities market, its origins difficult to verify. This immediately raises red flags as it leaves the object open to the possibility of being a modern forgery. The debate among historians and linguists has been intense and centers on the details of the inscription itself. Some experts point to anomalies in the script, suggesting that the cuneiform signs don't perfectly match the known evolution of Old Persian writing from that specific period. They argue that a forger working from known later inscriptions might have made subtle mistakes in replicating the archaic forms of the characters. Other scholars, however, have mounted a vigorous defense of the tablet's legitimacy. They argue that the linguistic and grammatical features of the text are consistent with what we would expect from an early Achaemenid inscription. They contend that the very simplicity and brevity of the text argue in its favor. A forger would likely have been tempted to create a longer, more elaborate and dramatic inscription to make the object seem more impressive. The fact that it is a modest declaration of lineage, they say, fits the profile of an early, local ruler asserting his authority. The controversy is a fascinating glimpse into the meticulous world of academic authentication, where every stroke of a cuneiform wedge is scrutinized under a microscope, and the burden of proof for an unproven object is exceptionally high. This tiny tablet forces us to confront a fundamental question in archaeology. How do we know what is real? It sits in a tantalizing gray area, a piece of evidence that could either illuminate a dark chapter of history or represent a brilliant, deceptive hoax. Ultimately, the Ekbatana gold tablet, regardless of its ultimate authenticity, serves as a powerful reminder of the fragile nature of historical evidence from the ancient world. Its story is a microcosm of the challenges historians face. For every grand monument like Behistun, there are countless smaller, more ambiguous artifacts whose stories are incomplete. The debate surrounding this object enriches our understanding by highlighting the meticulous methods scholars use to separate fact from fiction. It teaches us to be critical, to question provenance, and to appreciate the complex interplay of evidence and interpretation that constructs our picture of the past. Whether it is a genuine voice from the time of Ariramnes or a clever modern creation, the Ekbatana gold tablet has sparked a crucial conversation about the origins of an empire, proving that sometimes the smallest artifacts can generate the very biggest questions. Now, as we move deeper into the ceremonial heart of the empire, we come to what may be the single most comprehensive visual record of Persian imperial ideology: the grand stairway reliefs of the Apadana Palace at Persepolis. If the administrative tablets gave us the empire's inner voice, these carvings are its public face, an epic sculpture frozen in limestone that was designed to overwhelm every visitor with the sheer scale and diversity of the King of Kings' domain. The Apadana was the great audience hall, the place where the monarch would receive delegations from every corner of his realm. And to reach him, these ambassadors had to climb a monumental staircase, their eyes level with one of the most detailed and intentional pieces of political art ever created. The reliefs don't just decorate the stairs, they are an integral part of the experience, a carefully choreographed prelude to an audience with power. The entire composition is a masterpiece of balance and order. On the center of each stairway, you see a beautiful, repeating motif of the royal lion attacking a bull, a powerful symbol of strength, the change of seasons, and perhaps the king's triumph over chaos. But the true narrative unfolds along the side walls, where a majestic procession unfolds in two long, parallel lines. This is not a scene of battle or conquest. It is a peaceful, orderly, and richly detailed depiction of the empire's annual tribute ceremony. The figures are carved in such high relief they seem to step out of the stone, their clothing, gifts, and even their facial features rendered with astonishing care. The message is one of peaceful submission and harmonious integration, a world united under the benevolent gaze of a single ruler. What makes these reliefs so extraordinary is their function as a visual census. They portray 23 distinct delegations, each led by a Persian or Median court official, representing every major satrapy or province from the empire. And the artists took great pains to differentiate each group. You can travel the world without moving a muscle. Here are the Egyptians bringing a bull and intricately woven cloth. There are the Babylonians leading a hump-backed bull and carrying intricately crafted vessels. The Lydians from Anatolia present precious metal bowls and 2-horse chariots. The Armenians bring a powerful stallion. The Ethiopians offer exotic gifts like ivory tusks and an okapi-like creature. The Sogdians from Central Asia have a Bactrian camel, while the Indians contribute donkeys and baskets of goods. Each group wears its unique national costume, distinctive hats, robes, hairstyles, and weapons, making the procession a living encyclopedia of ancient fashion and culture. This was the Persian Empire's version of a World's Fair, a permanent exhibition of its global reach, but this was far more than a simple catalogue of possessions. It was a sophisticated piece of political theatre carved in stone. For a visiting ambassador, the message was unmistakable. As you climbed the stairs to your audience, you would see your own people, accurately depicted, participating in this grand, orderly ceremony. You were not an outsider, you were part of the system, your identity acknowledged and your place in the hierarchy clearly defined. The reliefs celebrated diversity, but within a rigid framework of Persian control. Each group is led by a Persian guide, their gifts destined for the Persian king. It communicated that the empire was strong enough to embrace difference, that its power was derived from the voluntary, or at least orderly, submission of countless nations. It showed the great king not as a distant tyrant, but as the center of the universe, receiving the bounty of the earth as his natural due. The Apadana reliefs are the ultimate expression of the Persian imperial idea: unity through diversity, power through pageantry, and a legacy of control so confident it could afford to be beautiful. Yet for all the grandeur of imperial art and royal pronouncements, history is often most powerfully told not by kings, but by the silent witnesses of everyday life. And few artifacts bring this truth home more dramatically than the haunting discovery of the salt men of Zanjan. Our journey now takes us away from sun-drenched palaces and into the cool, dark depths of the Cherabad salt mine in northwestern Iran. Here, in the year 1993, miners were excavating a new tunnel when their machinery struck something unexpected: not rock, but a human head, its hair and beard startlingly intact, its face preserved for millennia by the very salt that had entombed it. This was the first of several incredibly well-preserved natural mummies, a group of individuals who had met their end in the mine shafts during two distinct historical periods, the Achaemenid and Sasanian eras. Unlike the deliberate, ritualistic mummification of Egypt, the preservation here was a complete accident of nature. The salt-rich environment absorbed all moisture, preventing decay and freezing these men and their possessions in a state of eerie suspension, offering us an unparalleled, almost intimate window into the lives of the common people who powered the Persian Empire. The scientific examination of these remains has yielded a wealth of personal detail that is almost unheard of for ordinary workers from antiquity. We know what these men looked like, what they wore, what tools they used, and even what they ate for their final meal. One of the most famous individuals, known as Salt Man I, was a young man, likely in his late teens, who died during the Achaemenid period around 400 BC. His body was found with severe trauma, including a crushed skull and broken bones, suggesting a tragic mining accident where a tunnel wall collapsed on him. His clothing was simple and practical: a leather tunic, woolen trousers, and leather boots, the standard gear of a manual laborer braving the harsh, dusty conditions of the mine. But it's the smaller, more personal items that truly connect us to him as a human being. He carried a Bronze-era pickaxe, his primary tool, and a walnut was found in his clothing, perhaps a snack for his break. Most poignantly, a single silver earring was discovered near his head, a small touch of personal adornment that speaks to an individual identity beyond his role as a miner. Perhaps the most captivating insight comes from the analysis of the contents of his stomach. Scientists were able to determine his Last Supper, a simple meal of vegetables and pulses, a humble diet that starkly contrasts with the lavish feasts enjoyed by the elite at Persepolis. This single detail is a powerful reminder of the vast social stratification within the empire. While the king received tribute from 24 nations, the workers who helped generate that wealth subsisted on basic, locally sourced food. Yet, the presence of inflammation in his stomach lining also revealed a chronic infection, likely from the Helicobacter pylori bacteria, giving us a glimpse into the health challenges and physical hardships of his short life. He was not just a statistic, he was a young man with a stomach ache doing a dangerous job who met a sudden and violent end. Later excavations revealed more individuals from the Sasanian period centuries later, showing that the mine was in use for a very long time. One of these later salt men was found with a rope still around his waist, another tragic victim of a collapsing shaft. The preservation of these bodies is so complete that archaeologists have even recovered fragments of the miner's own skin and hair, allowing for unprecedented DNA and isotopic analysis. This science tells stories of migration and diet, suggesting that some of these workers may have come from different regions to labor in the mine, part of a mobile workforce within the empire. The salt men are a time capsule of the working class. They force us to look beyond the glittering treasures and grand inscriptions and remember the immense human effort required to build and sustain a civilization. They are a silent testament to the thousands of anonymous individuals whose daily toil, conducted in the dark and the dust, made the splendor of the palaces above ground possible. In their preserved forms, we find a more complete and profoundly more human history of ancient Persia. But while the salt men reveal the human cost of empire, our next discovery showcases the military machine that secured it, a technology that clad the Persian warrior in a shimmering, living skin of metal. Scattered across archaeological sites from the battlefields of Marathon to the heart of the empire, archaeologists have uncovered countless small, overlapping plates of bronze and iron, the individual scales of Achaemenid armor. Imagine finding not an intact breastplate or helmet, but a pile of these tiny metallic tiles, each one perforated with small holes along the top edge. To the untrained eye, they might look like discarded fish scales or broken pottery, but to a historian, they are the scattered pieces of a revolutionary military technology that allowed the armies of the great king to dominate the ancient world for centuries. When reconstructed, these scales reveal a type of armor known as scale mail, a brilliant compromise between protection, mobility, and cost that was perfectly suited to the needs of a vast, multi-ethnic imperial army. The principle was simple yet effective. Each individual scale, typically rectangular or slightly curved, was punched with 2 or more holes at the top. They were then laced or riveted onto a flexible foundation of leather or heavy cloth in overlapping rows, much like the shingles on a roof or the scales on a lizard. This design created a defensive garment that could be fashioned into a cuirass for the torso, sleeves for the arms, or even leggings. The overlap was crucial. When a sword slash or an arrow struck, the force would be distributed across multiple scales, preventing a single point of failure. The armor was remarkably flexible, allowing a soldier to run, bend, and fight with a freedom that was impossible in the rigid, bronze bell cuirasses worn by early Greek hoplites. For the Persian army, which relied heavily on mobile troops like archers and cavalry, this mobility was a decisive advantage. A horse archer, needing to twist and aim in the saddle, would have been severely hampered by stiff plate armor, but scale mail moved with him. The materials used tell a story of both practicality and resource management. Bronze scales were more common, easier to produce, and offered good protection against the slashing weapons common in the Near East. But excavations have also revealed scales made of iron, a stronger and more technologically advanced material. The use of iron scales, which required higher forging temperatures and greater skill to work, points to a sophisticated military-industrial complex within the empire. It suggests that certain elite units, perhaps the king's own immortals or high-ranking cavalry officers, had access to superior equipment. This variation highlights a key aspect of Persian military organization. It was not a monolithic force uniformly equipped, but a diverse army where the quality of your armor likely depended on your rank, your unit, and your ethnic origin within the empire's vast recruiting pool. This brings us to a fascinating comparison with their most famous adversaries, the Greeks. The classic image of a Greek hoplite is a heavily armored infantryman, a veritable tank on the battlefield. His primary protection was a large bronze breastplate and backplate, a single, heavy piece of armor that offered superb protection for the torso but sacrificed flexibility and was incredibly expensive to produce. This reflected the Greek city-state model, where warfare was often the domain of citizen farmers who could afford to equip themselves. The Persian approach was fundamentally different. As an empire that fielded armies of colossal size drawn from across its territories, it needed a system of armor that was effective, but also scalable and relatively economical to produce in massive quantities. Scale mail fit this need perfectly. Individual scales could be manufactured by numerous workshops simultaneously and were far easier to repair than a single, solid bronze plate. If a scale was damaged, you simply replaced it. This logistical efficiency was a military strength in itself. The effectiveness of this armor on the battlefield is a subject of much debate, often viewed through the lens of Greek propaganda. Greek historians, celebrating their victories at Marathon and Plataea, often depicted the Persians as lightly armored, almost fragile opponents, their cloth robes offering little defense against the thrust of a Greek spear. This portrayal served to magnify the Greek achievement, but the archaeological evidence of scale armor tells a different story. A Persian soldier equipped with a full set of well-made scale mail would have been very well protected indeed. The key vulnerability was not the armor itself, but the fact that it may not have been issued to every soldier in the massive Persian hosts. Levies from distant provinces might have worn only padded linen or leather, while the core Persian troops were much better equipped. The discovery of these scales on battle sites in Greece itself proves that this technology was carried into the heart of the conflict, a tangible remnant of the soldiers who fought and died there. Each recovered scale is a silent testament to the individual warrior who wore it, a small piece of the formidable, complex, and often misunderstood military machine that built and defended the Persian Empire. Now we turn from the personal tragedies of the salt mines to the very foundations of imperial power, both literally and figuratively. High on our list are the foundation tablets of Susa, artifacts that take us to the moment of creation, to the ceremonial laying of the first stone. While the Apadana reliefs showed us the empire in its glorious maturity, these tablets document its ambitious birth, the very act of building a capital worthy of a world power. Discovered not in a museum display case, but embedded deep within the walls and beneath the floors of the great palaces at Susa, these inscribed clay and stone tablets were never meant for public view. Their audience was not the living, but the gods and the generations of the future. They were hidden treasures placed as permanent records of a king's greatest achievement, a message in a bottle sealed within the bricks and mortar of the empire itself. The concept of a foundation deposit was an ancient tradition throughout the Near East, but the Persian kings elevated it to a new level of geopolitical statement. When a new palace or temple was constructed, a small pit would be carefully prepared at a critical point in the foundation, often at a corner or beneath a doorway. Into this pit, workers would place a curated collection of objects, precious metals like gold and silver ingots, samples of the stones used in the building, and most importantly, these inscribed tablets. The most famous examples come from the reign of Darius the Great, who undertook a massive building program at Susa, transforming it into a dazzling administrative capital. The tablets, typically made of baked clay or, for the most important declarations, crafted from valuable materials like lapis lazuli or marble, served a dual purpose. On a spiritual level, they were a dedication to the gods, seeking divine favor and protection for the new structure. On a practical, political level, they were a permanent claim of ownership and achievement, a way for the king to ensure that his name and his deeds would be associated with the building for all time. The inscriptions on these tablets are remarkable for their incredible detail, reading less like a royal boast and more like a meticulous inventory or a project manager's final report. Darius doesn't just say he built a great palace, he tells us exactly how he did it. One famous foundation charter from Susa provides a breathtakingly specific list of the materials used and, even more importantly, their origins. The text tells us that the cedar timber was brought from Lebanon, the teak wood was transported from Gandhara in what is now Pakistan and Afghanistan. The gold used for decoration came from Sardis in Lydia. The precious lapis lazuli and carnelian were sourced from Sogdiana and Khwarezmia in Central Asia. The silver and ebony were obtained from Egypt. The ivory was crafted by artisans from Ionia and Sardis, and the stone columns were quarried and shaped by the skilled stonemasons of a place called Abaradash in Elam. This list is far more than a simple bill of materials. It is a powerful and deliberate piece of imperial propaganda. By cataloging the far-flung origins of every component, Darius is making a profound statement about the nature of his empire. He is showing that his authority is not limited to one land or one people. He commands the resources of the entire known world. The palace at Susa is not just a Persian building, it is a physical manifestation of the empire itself, a structure literally assembled from the bounty of every conquered nation. The very walls surrounding the king are built from Lebanese cedar, Indian teak, and Egyptian ivory, a constant, tangible reminder that the entire world serves him. It transforms the architecture from mere stone and wood into a symbol of global domination and integration. Furthermore, the inscription highlights the human element behind this colossal effort. Darius proudly states that the workers who built the palace were drawn from across his realms: Ionians and Sardians, Babylonians and Medes, Egyptians and Bactrians. This echoes the message of the Apadana reliefs, celebrating the empire's diversity. But here, the focus is on skilled labor, not ceremonial tribute. He is boasting that he can not only extract raw materials from his subjects, but also mobilize their finest craftsmen, bringing them together to create something greater than the sum of its parts. The palace becomes a monument to cooperation under Persian leadership, a place where the best of the known world collaborated to glorify the King of Kings. The foundation tablets of Susa, therefore, are the ultimate expression of the imperial ideal. They are hidden keystones that lock together the physical structure of the palace and the ideological framework of the empire, proving that the power of Persia was built not just on conquest, but on the organized, magnificent synthesis of an entire world's wealth and talent. While the foundation tablets of Susa reveal the meticulous planning behind the empire's grandest structures, our next artifact stands in stark contrast, a solitary, weathered sentinel whose original purpose has been lost to time. In the modern city of Hamadan, which sits atop the ruins of the ancient Median and Persian capital of Ecbatana, rests a massive stone lion. This sculpture, carved from a single block of yellowish rock, is a powerful but enigmatic figure. It lies somewhat awkwardly on a stone platform, its body heavy and its features worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. Unlike the precise, detailed reliefs at Persepolis, the Lion of Hamadan has a primal, almost abstract quality to it. You can clearly make out the powerful body, the sturdy legs, and the broad head, but the finer details have been erased by the elements, leaving a ghost of its former self. Its very presence in this city, once a summer capital for Persian kings, hints at a significance we can only partially grasp, making it one of Persia's most compelling historical puzzles. The central mystery that surrounds the lion is a simple one with no easy answer. What was it for? Archaeologists and historians have proposed several theories, each painting a different picture of its original context. One prominent idea suggests it was not a standalone monument but part of a pair, serving as a guardian figure at the entrance to a significant building or a royal tomb. In the ancient Near East, lions were universally recognized symbols of royal power, strength, and protection. To place two such beasts at a gateway was to create a threshold of immense symbolic importance, a non-verbal warning and a declaration of authority. This theory is bolstered by the lion's posture. It isn't depicted in a dynamic pose of attack, but rather in a calm, reclining position, a common stance for guardian figures meant to project permanent, vigilant power. Another compelling theory posits that the lion was a grave marker, perhaps for a prominent general or even a member of the royal family. The ancient Greeks who had contact with Persia sometimes referred to Ecbatana and its surroundings, and some local legends have tenuously linked the lion to the tomb of a famous figure. The most romantic of these connections, though historically very unlikely, is to the Macedonian general Behistun, the close companion of Alexander the Great who died in Ecbatana. While there's no solid evidence for this, the persistence of the story shows how the monument has attracted mythological explanations to fill the void left by lost history. A third possibility is that it was a freestanding monument commissioned by a king to commemorate a great victory or to simply dominate the cityscape of ancient Ecbatana, a permanent stone embodiment of the crown's authority visible to all who entered the city. Without an accompanying inscription or a clear archaeological context, it was moved to its current location in the 20th century. The lion's true purpose remains an open question, its silence inviting endless speculation. This ambiguity has allowed a rich tapestry of local folklore to grow around the stone beast over the centuries. One of the most enduring legends claims that the lion was not always alone. The story goes that there were originally two lions and that they were endowed with a magical property. If a woman who could not bear children passed between them, she would be granted fertility. This beautiful folktale transforms the lions from symbols of imperial power into agents of life and hope, deeply embedding them in the community's social and spiritual life. Another, more somber legend tells of a sculptor who was commissioned to create the lions. Upon finishing his work, the local ruler, fearing the artist might create something even more magnificent for a rival, had him blinded. In this version, the lion becomes a monument to both artistic genius and tragic cruelty. These stories, whether fact or fiction, are incredibly valuable. They demonstrate how a community interacts with its ancient past, weaving narratives that give meaning to an otherwise mysterious object. The Lion of Hamadan is not just an archaeological artifact, it is a living part of the city's identity, its meaning reshaped by each generation that has lived in its shadow. Ultimately, the power of the Lion of Hamadan lies in its enduring presence and its stubborn silence. It has witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the Medes, the Achaemenid Persians, the Seleucids, the Parthians, the Sasanians, and all the way to the present day. It has seen armies march past and centuries turn. Its worn surface is a physical record of the passage of time, a stark contrast to the perfectly preserved treasures found in sealed tombs or frozen graves. It forces us to acknowledge that much of history is not neatly labeled or easily understood. Some artifacts, like the Cyrus Cylinder, speak to us directly with inscriptions. Others, like this lion, communicate through their sheer physicality and the aura of mystery they carry. It stands as a poignant reminder that for all we have learned about ancient Persia, there are still secrets waiting in plain sight, silent stone witnesses to a past we are still striving to fully comprehend. After the monumental stone lion of Hamadan, we now journey to a far earlier period in Persian history, to a time before empires and grand capitals, where the mysteries of death and the afterlife were addressed with a more intimate and, to our modern eyes, rather startling practice. Our next artifact isn't a single object, but a recurring archaeological phenomenon, the jar burial. One of the most significant sites revealing this custom is Tepe Hisar, a settlement mound in northeastern Iran that was occupied for millennia, with its most prominent period falling in the Bronze Age, long before the rise of Cyrus the Great. Here, archaeologists excavating the layers of the ancient town made a poignant discovery. They uncovered the remains of the deceased not laid out in coffins or simple graves, but carefully placed inside large, sturdy ceramic jars. These vessels, which in daily life might have been used for storing grain, oil, or water, were repurposed as eternal homes for the dead. The bodies were typically arranged in a flexed or fetal position, curled up as if in sleep, and then sealed within the jar, often with a smaller pot or a flat stone serving as a lid. This wasn't a haphazard act of disposal. It was a deliberate, widespread funerary ritual that offers a profound window into the spiritual worldview of prehistoric Persia. The symbolism embedded in this practice is deeply resonant. Placing a body in a fetal position inside a container that so clearly resembles a womb is a powerful metaphor found in many ancient cultures. It suggests a belief in a cycle of existence, a return to a protective, enclosed space that mirrors the beginning of life, perhaps hinting at an expectation of rebirth or a new beginning in the afterlife. The jar itself acts as a boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead, a sacred vessel protecting the deceased on their journey and containing their spirit, preventing it from wandering and potentially causing harm to the community. These burials were often located within the confines of the settlement itself, sometimes even beneath the floors of houses. This proximity speaks volumes. It indicates that the dead were not separated from the living but were considered part of the continuing family and social unit. Ancestors remained physically and spiritually close, their presence a foundational part of the home, offering protection and legitimacy to their descendants. The goods placed inside the jars with the deceased, simple personal ornaments, pottery, or tools, suggest a belief that these items would be of use in the next life, reflecting a practical concern for the well-being of the soul after death. This intimate, container-based approach to burial stands in the most stark contrast to the funerary practices that would later become dominant in Persia under the influence of Zoroastrianism. The Zoroastrian faith, which likely began to take shape during the late Bronze Age and became the state religion of the Achaemenid Empire, held a radically different view of the dead body. In Zoroastrian cosmology, a corpse is considered nasu, a source of ritual impurity that threatens the sacred elements of the world, especially fire, earth, and water. To bury a body in the earth or to cremate it was seen as a profound act of pollution, contaminating the pure creations of the supreme god, Ahura Mazda. Instead, the prescribed method was exposure, most famously in structures known as Towers of Silence. Here, the body would be left for scavenging birds and the elements to decompose naturally, allowing the flesh to be cleansed away while the bones, now neutralized, could be collected in an ossuary. This practice aimed to achieve the purest possible dissociation of the spiritual from the corruptible physical form. The shift from jar burial to sky burial, therefore, represents a fundamental revolution in religious thought. The people of Tepe Hisar, with their bodies curled in ceramic wombs beneath their homes, saw death as a transition within a continuous cycle, maintaining a physical connection with their ancestors. The later Zoroastrians viewed death as a moment of dangerous impurity, requiring a complete and ritualized separation of the body from the sacred elements of the world to ensure cosmic order. One practice seeks to integrate the dead with the living and the earth, the other seeks to protect the living and the cosmos from the pollution of the dead. This evolution reminds us that ancient Persia was not a monolith with a single, unchanging set of beliefs. It was a dynamic landscape where spiritual ideas transformed over centuries, and the silent, buried jars of Tepe-Hissar are a moving testament to an earlier, deeply different understanding of life, death, and what lies beyond. This seamless blending of cultures becomes even more apparent as we travel to the very edge of the empire, to a region where Persian influence met the ancient traditions of the Indian subcontinent. Here, in the ancient city of Taxila, a crossroads of civilizations in what is now modern Pakistan, a remarkable discovery was made, a stunning silver vase that perfectly encapsulates the far-reaching cultural currents of the Achaemenid age. The Gandharan Taxila vase is an object of understated elegance, a vessel that would have held wine or precious oils, its surface gleaming with the soft luster of expertly worked silver. But its true value lies not in the material itself, but in the story told by its intricate decoration. At first glance, the motifs are unmistakably Persian. You see the familiar procession of animals, a theme dear to Achaemenid artists, perhaps lions or ibexes, arranged in a repeating frieze around the body of the vase. The symmetry, the elegance of the lines, the very choice of subject matter, all of it echoes the artistic language of Persepolis and Susa. This vase could easily have been crafted in a royal workshop in the heart of the empire. But then, you look closer, the way the animals are rendered, the slight curvature of a horn, the specific floral patterns filling the space between figures. These details carry a subtle but distinct local flavor, an Indian sensibility that transforms a Persian import into something uniquely Gandharan. The presence of this vase in Taxila is a powerful testament to the economic and cultural reach of the Persian Empire at its zenith. Taxila was a major urban center in the satrapy of Gandhara, a wealthy and strategically vital province that served as the eastern gateway to India. Controlling this region gave Persia access to the immense wealth of the subcontinent: gold, spices, ivory, and exotic woods. The royal road, that marvel of Achaemenid engineering, did not simply end in the Iranian plateau. Its trade routes extended eastward, carrying goods, ideas, and people back and forth. This vase was almost certainly a luxury item, owned by a local elite who wanted to signal their connection to the sophisticated power of the imperial center. It speaks of a society where adopting Persian styles was a mark of status, a way of participating in a broader, cosmopolitan world. The vase wasn't just a container, it was a symbol of belonging to an international elite, much like owning a designer object from a global fashion house today signifies a certain worldly connection. But the story is not one of simple imitation. The artisans of Gandhara were not merely copying Persian designs, they were adapting them, blending them with their own rich artistic heritage to create a new hybrid style. This process is what scholars call cultural syncretism, and the Taxila vase is a perfect example. The Persian motifs provided a framework, a visual language of power and prestige that was recognized across the empire. Yet, the local craftsmen infused this framework with their own sensibilities, perhaps softening the rigid formality of pure Achaemenid art with a more fluid, naturalistic touch influenced by Indian traditions. This artifact shows us that the empire's influence was not a one-way street, imposing a monolithic culture on its subjects. Instead, it was a dynamic exchange. Persian art influenced Gandharan art, which would later, in turn, profoundly influence the development of Buddhist sculpture as it spread north along the Silk Road. The Taxila vase, therefore, sits at a critical historical junction. It is a beautiful physical remnant of the moment when Persian imperial aesthetics met South Asian creativity, a fusion that would have lasting consequences for the art and culture of all of Asia. It reminds us that the most enduring legacies of empire are often not the edicts of kings, but the quiet, creative dialogues that happen between artists and their patrons in workshops thousands of miles from the throne. From the bustling trade crossroads of Taxila, we now journey to a place of profound quiet and spiritual ambiguity, a site that seems to withdraw from the world rather than engage with it. Nestled in the mountains near the city of Nishapur in northeastern Iran is the Kadamga rock-cut sanctuary, a Sasanian-era monument that challenges easy explanation. Unlike the grand, open-air reliefs of earlier kings or the sprawling foundations of palaces, Kadamga is an introspective space carved directly into the heart of a living cliff face. It consists of a series of chambers and, most notably, 3 meticulously leveled rectangular platforms cut right into the stone floor, resembling empty basins or shallow troughs. There are no grand statues, no towering columns. The power of Kadamga lies in its stark simplicity and its stubborn refusal to declare its purpose outright, inviting us into a centuries-old debate about the nature of Sasanian worship and royal ceremony. Was this a Zoroastrian fire temple, a pilgrimage site marking a holy footprint, or a temporary resting place for a traveling king? The carvings and inscriptions left by later visitors only deepen the mystery, turning the sanctuary into a palimpsest of Persian history. The most prominent theory, given the Sasanian dynasty's staunch adherence to Zoroastrianism, is that Kadamga was a unique type of fire temple. The state religion centered on the reverence of fire as a symbol of divine truth, and fire temples required a sacred, ever-burning flame housed in a protected space. The 3 rock-cut platforms at Kadamga could have been designed to hold sacred fires. Their elevation and precise craftsmanship would have isolated the flames, keeping them pure and visible to worshippers. The chambers carved behind them might have served as rooms for the priests, the mobads, to prepare for rituals away from the elements. This interpretation paints a picture of a secluded, mountain-top sanctuary where the eternal fire could burn in a setting of natural majesty, far from the pollution of everyday life. The mountain itself becomes a natural wall of the temple, connecting the sacred flame directly to the enduring earth. However, other scholars propose a more specific function tied to the site's name, which translates to place of the footstep. This suggests it may have been a pilgrimage destination, a pur, believed to be marked by the footprint of a holy figure, perhaps a Zoroastrian sage or even a legendary king from the Kayanian dynasty of Persian epic poetry. Pilgrims would travel great distances to such sites to pay homage, seeking blessings or atonement. The platforms in this reading might not have held fire but rather served as areas for pilgrims to leave offerings or to perform specific rituals of veneration. The secluded, difficult-to-access location would be consistent with many sacred sites around the world, where the journey itself is part of the spiritual test. This theory transforms Kadamga from an official state temple into a destination for personal, popular devotion, a place where the boundary between orthodox Zoroastrian practice and local folk belief might have blurred. A third, compelling idea considers the practical needs of Sasanian royalty. The site is located along an important ancient road connecting the cultural centers of western Iran with the eastern provinces of Khorasan and beyond. It is possible that Kadamga functioned as a royal way station, a secure and dignified stopping point for the king and his court during their long journeys across the empire. The leveled platforms could have been foundations for temporary royal tents or pavilions, erected within the protective embrace of the rock shelter. This would have provided a naturally fortified and ceremonially significant camp, a place where the King of Kings could rest and perhaps even hold audience while on the move. In this view, the sanctity of the place is derived from the presence of the royal person, making it a mobile extension of courtly power rather than a static religious monument. The clues left at the site only partially illuminate its story. While there are no grand Sasanian inscriptions that definitively explain the sanctuary's founding, later generations felt compelled to leave their mark. The walls feature Pahlavi and Arabic inscriptions from the early Islamic period, as well as carvings from the Seljuk era. These later additions are incredibly significant. They show that long after the fall of the Sasanian Empire, the site retained its aura of holiness and importance. People continued to visit, to carve their names, and to seek meaning in this ancient place. This continuity of reverence suggests that Kadamga's power transcended any single dynasty or religion. It became a perennial focal point for spiritual yearning in the Iranian landscape. The Kadamga sanctuary, in its silent mystery, embodies a truth about ancient sites. Their meaning is not fixed but evolves, layered by centuries of belief and interpretation. It stands not as a clear answer, but as an enduring question carved in stone. But even as grand sanctuaries like Kadamga speak to organized religion and royal power, our next discovery pulls us into a far more intimate and puzzling realm: the world of personal, perhaps even playful, objects. This brings us to artifact number 18, a small, unassuming piece of earthenware that has been dubbed the persistence of memory for its enigmatic, almost surreal form. Imagine an archaeologist's hand brushing the dust from a small, fired clay object, no larger than a clenched fist. It isn't a recognizable pot or a figurine of a person or an animal. Instead, it's an abstract shape, a collection of interconnected coils, loops, and perhaps small protrusions, with a texture that might suggest something organic or deliberately patterned. There are no inscriptions, no clear signs of wear from a specific use, no obvious parallels to anything else found in the region. It is a true blank slate, a concrete expression of a thought process we can no longer easily follow, and it serves as a powerful reminder of the vast chasms in our understanding of ancient daily life and symbolic thought. The immediate challenge with such an object is assigning it a function, and archaeologists have proposed a fascinating range of possibilities, each painting a different picture of its owner's world. One theory suggests it was a ritual object, a talisman, or a votive offering. Its abstract nature could represent a concept important to a belief system that predates Zoroastrianism, a symbol of fertility, a stylized tree of life, or a map of a spiritual cosmology known only to the initiated. In this interpretation, its power lies in its ambiguity, meant to be understood only by those within a specific cultural or religious context. Holding it might have been part of a prayer or a ceremony, its strange form acting as a key to a spiritual state now lost to time. A second, more mundane but equally compelling idea is that it was simply a toy. Children in every culture have created objects for play, and this clay form could be an ancient puzzle, an early game piece, or a sculptural exercise. Perhaps it was meant to be rolled, or its loops were used to thread a string. Without clear evidence of wear, it's difficult to prove, but this theory connects us to the universal experience of childhood, suggesting that amidst the harsh realities of ancient life, there was still room for imagination and whimsy. A third possibility positions it as a practical tool. It could have been a loom weight for a small handheld loom, its odd shape providing the necessary tension for weaving. Alternatively, it might have been used in food preparation, perhaps as a stamp for impressing designs onto bread or cheese, or even as a net sinker for fishing. Each practical theory grounds the object in the rhythm of everyday chores, a silent participant in the domestic economy of a Persian household. What makes this artifact so profoundly important is not the answer, but the question itself. Its very resistance to classification highlights the limits of our knowledge. We have a relatively clear understanding of Persian statecraft, warfare, and royal art because those things were recorded in stone and precious metals, designed to last and to convey a specific message. But the inner world of the common person, their games, their personal superstitions, their small household rituals, these are the textures of history that are most easily lost. An object like this persistence of memory is a direct challenge to the historian. It forces us to admit that for all the grand narratives we can construct about empires and kings, we are often guessing when it comes to the subtle nuances of daily existence. It represents the countless ordinary objects that disintegrated over time, the ideas that were never written down, the silent majority whose lives are summarized only by the potsherds and foundation stones they left behind. This small lump of clay is a monument to all that we do not know, a humble yet profound testament to the mystery that still shrouds the anonymous individuals who truly constituted the ancient world. Now, let's shift our focus from the enigmatic abstract objects of daily life to a technology so fundamental it helped bind that vast empire together, the invention of standardized money. Before the rise of the Persian Empire, economic life was a complex patchwork. Trade relied on barter, directly swapping goods, or on weighing out precious metal bullion, a cumbersome process requiring scales and constant haggling over purity. Imagine a merchant from Babylon trying to sell his wares in Lydia. He'd need to navigate a bewildering array of local weights, measures, and metal compositions. The Achaemenid kings, brilliant administrators that they were, saw an opportunity for revolutionary efficiency. They didn't invent coinage. That credit usually goes to the Lydians in neighboring Anatolia, but they were the first to grasp its potential on an imperial scale, transforming a clever local innovation into a powerful tool of global economics and propaganda. The Persian system was a masterpiece of standardization. Under Darius the Great, the empire introduced a bimetallic currency that became the gold standard, quite literally, for the ancient world. The two primary coins were the gold daric and the silver siglos. The daric, named after Darius himself, was a high-value coin of exceptional purity, containing about 8.4 grams of nearly pure gold. It was a coin for major transactions, for paying armies, and for storing royal treasure. The siglos was the workhorse of the empire, a silver coin of about 5.6 grams that was used for everyday trade and crucially for paying taxes. The beauty of the system was its fixed exchange rate maintained by the royal government. While the actual market value of gold to silver might fluctuate, the empire enforced a stable ratio, often around 1 gold daric to 20 silver sigloi. This created a predictable and reliable financial environment from the banks of the Nile to the foothills of the Hindu Kush. But these coins were far more than just pieces of metal. They were miniature billboards for royal power. The design was deliberately simple, consistent, and potent. On the obverse, the front side, was the most important image, the great king himself. He was not depicted as a passive portrait, but in a dynamic and highly symbolic pose. He is shown as a royal archer kneeling on one knee, holding a bow in one hand and a spear in the other. He wears a crown and a long, formal robe. This was a carefully crafted icon. The bow was the signature weapon of the Persian nobility, a symbol of military might and aristocratic status. By showing himself as an archer, the king was visually asserting his role as the empire's supreme warrior and protector. The image was instantly recognizable, its message clear to anyone who held the coin, regardless of their native language. On the reverse was a simple, punch-marked indentation, a result of the minting process. There were no words, no complex legends. The image of the king was all the identification needed. This visual consistency was key. A daric minted in Sardes looked identical to one minted in Egypt or Bactria. This uniformity broadcast a message of central control and imperial unity. Every time a merchant used a daric, he was handling a piece of the king's authority, a tangible reminder of who ruled the economic life of the known world. The economic impact of this standardized currency cannot be overstated. It dramatically simplified long-distance trade. A merchant could now travel across the empire with confidence, knowing his Persian coins would be accepted at their face value without the need for complex assayers to test the metal. This fueled commerce, encouraged specialization in different regions, and increased the overall wealth of the empire. More importantly for the state, it revolutionized taxation. Instead of demanding tribute in the form of specific goods which required complex logistics to store and transport, the central government could demand payment in silver sigloi. This made the collection and redistribution of wealth incredibly efficient. The vast sums needed to pay the army, fund building projects like Persepolis, and maintain the bureaucracy could now be moved and accounted for with ease. The coinage was the lubricant that kept the complex machinery of the empire running smoothly. The reliability of Persian coinage even earned it a reputation beyond the empire's borders. Greek historians, often hostile to Persia, repeatedly mention the archer coins, acknowledging their high quality and consistent purity. In fact, Persian darics became a trusted currency in the Greek world itself, often used by Greek city-states to pay for mercenaries. This is a powerful testament to the coin's perceived value. The Greeks might have fought the Persians on the battlefield, but they trusted the gold from the great king's treasury. This external acceptance highlights how the Persian monetary system transcended politics to become a foundational element of international finance in the ancient world. The humble coin, with its image of a kneeling archer, was arguably one of the most durable and far-reaching inventions of the Achaemenid Empire, a technology of power whose basic principles would echo through economic systems for millennia to come. From the standardized precision of imperial coinage, let us now lift our gaze upward to the very heights of royal architecture, where mythical beasts of stone once crowned the towering columns of the king's hall. Imagine walking through the grand portal of a Persian palace, your eyes drawn inevitably upward along the soaring trunks of massive columns, past intricate floral patterns and fluted shafts, until they finally rest upon the breathtaking sight that capped it all, the Griffin capital from Susa. These were not mere structural supports, they were the crowning glory of Persian architectural genius, a fusion of art and engineering on a truly monumental scale. Crafted from dark, gleaming limestone or even marble, these capitals often took the form of a double protom, the foreparts of two powerful animals set back to back, their necks and heads curling gracefully downward and then sweeping outward to support the massive wooden beams of the ceiling. While bulls were a common motif, the griffin-headed capitals were particularly potent, merging the terrestrial power of the lion with the celestial authority of the eagle into a single, awe-inspiring symbol of the king's dominion over both earth and sky. The sheer physicality of these creations is difficult to comprehend from a museum display. A single capital could stand over 2 meters tall and weigh several tons. The craftsmanship required to carve such a complex, organic form from a single block of stone without the aid of modern power tools is a testament to the skill of the empire's stonemasons. They had to visualize the final, curvilinear shape within the raw stone, carefully chiseling away until the powerful necks, the detailed feathers of the griffin's head, and the sharp, curved beak emerged with perfect symmetry. This was not crude construction, it was high art executed on a colossal scale. The placement of these capitals was a deliberate act of psychological theater. As a visitor or a subject approached the king in his audience hall, their line of sight was forced upward, following the vertical lines of the columns to these mythical creatures hovering overhead. The griffins, with their piercing, likely once inlaid eyes, would have seemed to watch over the entire proceedings, silent guardians reinforcing the divine sanction and overwhelming power of the monarch seated below them. The space was engineered not just to impress but to humble, making the individual feel small in the face of an authority supported by such mythical forces. Symbolically, the Griffin capital was a dense concentration of Persian imperial ideology. The griffin itself, a composite creature known in ancient Near Eastern art for millennia, was the perfect emblem for the Persian king of kings. It combined the lion's role as the quintessential symbol of royal strength and courage with the eagle's association with the sun, the heavens, and divine vision. By choosing this hybrid, the Achaemenid rulers were communicating that their power was not just earthly but also celestial, sanctioned by the gods and possessing a panoramic, all-seeing perspective over their vast domains. Furthermore, the very structure of the double protom capital, two creatures facing opposite directions, spoke to the omnipresent nature of royal authority. From their lofty perch, these griffins could survey both halves of the Great Hall simultaneously. There was no angle from which one could escape their gaze, just as there was no corner of the empire beyond the reach of the king's administration. The capital became a microcosm of the empire itself, unified, powerful, vigilant, and founded on a blend of the real and the mythical. The specific capital found at Susa, now housed in the Louvre Museum, tells an even deeper story of cultural synthesis and logistical might. Susa was an ancient Elamite city that the Persians adopted and transformed into a magnificent administrative capital. The Griffin capital discovered there is particularly famous for its exquisite state of preservation and its detailed polychromy. Traces of paint remain, revealing that these stone monsters were once vibrantly colored blues, reds, yellows, making them even more dazzling and lifelike in the dimly lit hall. But an inscription found at Susa, similar to the foundation tablets, adds another layer of wonder. It records that the stone for the columns was quarried from a specific location, while the craftsmen who worked it were Ionian Greeks. This detail is profound. It shows that the Persian Empire was not just a consumer of art but a brilliant curator and director of talent, drawing the best artisans from conquered lands, including the renowned sculptors of Greece, and directing their skills toward a distinctly Persian visual language. The Griffin capital of Susa is therefore more than a symbol. It is a physical product of the empire's multicultural engine, a stone testament to its ability to harness the entire world's resources, both material and human, to create spaces that would forever define the meaning of absolute power. Leaving the symbolic heights of the Griffin capitals, our journey now takes us to a raw and rugged landscape, to a place where Persian authority was literally carved into the living rock on the very edge of empire. High on a cliff face overlooking the dramatic expanse of Lake Van in what is now eastern Turkey, we find the inscription of Xerxes. This is not the ornate, ceremonial art of a capital city, but something far more direct and purposeful, a statement of power aimed at a strategic and often rebellious frontier. Carved during the reign of Xerxes I, the son of the great Darius, this trilingual proclamation sits in a location steeped in ancient history, near the heart of the former Eurasian kingdom. Its presence here is no accident. The Armenian highlands were a crucial buffer zone, a volatile region controlling the vital trade and military routes between Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and the Iranian plateau. For the Persian Empire to be secure, this mountainous territory had to be firmly under control. The inscription was Xerxes's way of stamping his royal seal upon the land, a permanent reminder to the local population that the power of the King of Kings reached even into their remote valleys. The text of the inscription itself is a fascinating historical echo. In many ways, it is a deliberate copy of his father's monumental work at Behistun. It is written in the same three languages, Old Persian, Babylonian, and Elamite. The content follows a similar formula, beginning with a standard royal genealogy. Xerxes identifies himself as the son of Darius the Great, the grandson of Hystaspes, and so on, tracing his lineage back to the legendary founder Achaemenes. This lengthy introduction was not merely a formality, it was the foundational argument for his legitimacy. By anchoring his rule in an established and glorious lineage, Xerxes was following a well-worn path of reinforcing the dynastic principle that held the empire together. He then offers a description of his kingdom, listing the many lands over which he rules, a boast of territorial control meant to impress and intimidate any reader. However, the Van inscription lacks the dramatic, detailed narrative of rebellion and suppression that makes Behistun so unique. There is no equivalent to the gripping story of Darius's first year, no gallery of defeated usurpers. This difference is highly significant. It suggests that by the time Xerxes came to the throne, the empire was in a different phase. The widespread revolts that Darius had to crush were a memory. The imperial system was more consolidated. The purpose of the Van inscription was not to justify a contested ascension, but to maintain and project an established authority. It was about continuity, not crisis management. Xerxes was essentially using his father's template, a proven tool of propaganda, to assert his control over a region that was perpetually sensitive. The message was simple: the same power that your fathers knew is still here, and it is now embodied in me. The choice of location speaks volumes about Persian strategic thinking. Lake Van was the center of the ancient Eurasian kingdom, a powerful Iron Age state that had once rivaled Assyria. By placing his inscription in this historically significant spot, Xerxes was consciously layering Persian authority over an older, local tradition of kingship. He was saying, in effect, that the new empire was the successor to, and the master of, all previous powers in the region. For the local Armenian chiefs and populations, seeing the wedge-shaped cuneiform script, the official writing of the imperial bureaucracy, etched permanently into a familiar landmark, was a constant, unavoidable reminder of where ultimate sovereignty lay. It was a psychological tool of domination, making the abstract concept of imperial rule a concrete, physical presence in their daily lives. Despite its importance as a political monument, the inscription of Xerxes at Van has faced a challenging history of its own. Unlike the relatively inaccessible Behistun, the Van Cliff has been more exposed to the elements and, sadly, to human damage. Over the centuries, natural weathering has taken its toll, blurring some of the carefully carved characters. More tragically, the inscription has suffered from vandalism. A large portion of the old Persian text was deliberately hacked away in antiquity, an act of defiance perhaps by those who resented Persian rule. This destruction means that the full text has had to be reconstructed using the surviving Elamite and Babylonian versions, a testament to the value of the trilingual system that Darius pioneered. Even in its damaged state, the inscription remains a powerful piece of evidence. It completes a geographical triangle of royal proclamations, with Behistun in the east, the inscriptions of Darius at Suez in the west, and Van in the north, marking the key strategic points of the empire. It shows us that the Persians understood the power of the written word in stone, not just as a record for the gods or for posterity, but as an active instrument of governance, a silent administrator carved into the frontiers of their vast and diverse domain. Now we venture away from the official inscriptions of kings and into the rugged, mountainous terrain of western Iran, to a region that has yielded some of the most visually striking and archaeologically puzzling artifacts of the ancient Near East, the Luristan bronzes. Discovered not in the context of a royal tomb or a planned excavation, but largely through clandestine digging by local people in the early 20th century, these objects exploded onto the antiquities market, captivating collectors with their wild energy and mysterious symbolism. The bronzes from Luristan are not a single type of object, but a dazzling array of weapons, horse trappings, votive pins, and ritual items, all characterized by a distinct artistic style that feels both untamed and incredibly sophisticated. They are the products of a culture that existed on the fringes of the great empires, a society of nomadic or semi-nomadic pastoralists whose legacy is defined not by written records or grand cities, but by the powerful metalwork they left behind in their highland graves. The mystery begins with the fundamental question of who created these extraordinary objects. Unlike the artifacts from Persepolis or Susa, which can be firmly dated and linked to specific kings through inscriptions, the Luristan bronzes are notoriously difficult to pin down. They are generally attributed to a people scholars refer to as the Kassites, or, more broadly, to Iranian tribal groups that flourished in the region during the early Iron Age, roughly from about 1000 to 650 BC. This places them chronologically on the periphery of the Neo-Assyrian and then the rising Neo-Elamite and Median powers, because they were mostly found by looters. Their archaeological context, the layers of soil, associated pottery, and other objects that help archaeologists determine age and use, was largely destroyed. This lack of context has fueled a vibrant and sometimes contentious debate. Some scholars argue for an earlier date, linking the style to the late 2nd millennium BC, while others place the main production period firmly in the Iron Age. This uncertainty means that the Lauristan bronzes represent a powerful but somewhat ghostly presence in the historical record, a vibrant cultural expression emerging from the shadows between the Bronze Age empires and the rise of Persia. What truly sets these bronzes apart is their unique and mesmerizing aesthetic. The most iconic pieces are the so-called idols or votive standards, often shaped like a horse bit but ending in elaborate, open-work finials. These are where the famous master of animals motif takes center stage. This powerful image depicts a central, often heroic-looking figure, sometimes human, sometimes more demonic, grasping two rampant animals, usually lions or fantastic beasts, one in each hand. The composition is symmetrical and intensely dynamic. The figure stands firm, a pillar of strength, while the animals twist and snarl, their bodies contorted into graceful, flowing arcs of muscle and sinew. The entire scene is a breathtaking struggle between order and chaos, between the controlling force of the hero and the untamed power of nature. This motif wasn't invented in Lauristan. It has deep roots in Mesopotamian and Elamite art, but the Lauristan artists made it their own, infusing it with a raw, almost explosive energy that feels uniquely connected to their rugged, mountainous homeland. This master of animals theme is profoundly symbolic. It can be interpreted in several ways, each adding a layer of meaning to these enigmatic objects. On one level, it likely represents a deity or a hero subduing the chaotic forces of the natural world, a metaphor for the human struggle to establish order and security in a dangerous environment. For a pastoralist society dependent on herds of sheep and goats, protecting those animals from predators like lions would have been a constant concern, making this image particularly resonant. On another level, it might symbolize a shaman or a priest mediating between the human and spiritual realms, controlling the powerful animal spirits that were believed to inhabit the world. The standards themselves may have been mounted on poles and used in religious ceremonies, their dramatic forms serving as a focal point for rituals aimed at ensuring fertility, victory in battle, or protection from evil. The power of the image lies in its universality. It speaks to a fundamental human desire to master the forces that surround us. Beyond these spectacular standards, the Lauristan bronzes include an entire arsenal of beautifully crafted practical objects that were also status symbols. There are daggers and axes with handles topped with animal heads, their jaws wide open in a silent roar. There are elaborate horse bits whose cheek pieces are themselves small masterpieces, often depicting animals or composite creatures. Imagine a warrior riding into battle, his horse controlled by a bit adorned with prancing ibexes or fierce griffins. Every piece of his equipment, from the weapon in his hand to the harness on his horse, would have proclaimed his skill, his wealth, and his connection to the mythical world. This blurring of the line between the utilitarian and the spiritual is a hallmark of Lauristan culture. A pin used to fasten a cloak might be crowned with an intricate scene of two animals back to back. A simple whetstone used to sharpen a blade might have a handle shaped like a stylized horse. For these people, art was not separate from life. It was woven into the very fabric of their daily existence and their most cherished beliefs. The relationship between the Lauristan culture and the rising Persian Empire to the east is a subject of fascinating speculation. The Lauristan region was eventually incorporated into the Median and then the Achaemenid empires. It is highly probable that the skilled metalworkers of Lauristan, with their centuries-old tradition of bronze casting using complex, lost wax techniques, were absorbed into the imperial system. Their distinctive artistic sensibility, particularly their mastery of animal forms, may have influenced the development of the so-called Achaemenid court style. The dynamic energy of the Lauristan beasts can be seen as a precursor to the more formalized but equally powerful animals that adorn the reliefs at Persepolis and the objects in the Oxus Treasure. In this way, the Loristan bronzes represent not just a mysterious outlier culture, but a vital tributary that fed into the great river of Persian art. They stand as a magnificent reminder that the brilliance of the empire was built upon a foundation of diverse and highly skilled regional traditions, each contributing its own unique voice to a grand and lasting symphony. But from the raw, abstract power of the Loristan bronzes, we now travel to a site of deep, living reverence, a place where history, legend, and faith intertwine in the very heart of a modern Iranian city. In the ancient city of Hamadan, not far from the silent stone lion, stands a simple, unassuming brick structure that holds immense significance for an entire people. This is the traditional tomb of Esther and Mordecai, a site venerated for centuries as the final resting place of the Jewish queen who saved her people from annihilation and her wise cousin who guided her. Unlike the grand royal tombs of Naksh-e-Rostam, this mausoleum is humble in scale, its dome rising quietly above a narrow street. Yet for generations of Iranian Jews and for pilgrims from across the world, this place is a powerful symbol of survival and a tangible link to a story that lies at the very core of their identity, a story set against the backdrop of the Persian Empire itself. The tradition linking this tomb to the biblical figures is rooted in the Book of Esther, a dramatic narrative that unfolds in the opulent court of a Persian king, often identified as Xerxes I. The story tells of a plot by the king's vizier, Haman, to exterminate all the Jews in the empire. The Jewish heroine Esther, who had hidden her identity, becomes queen and with the counsel of her cousin Mordecai, risks her life by revealing the plot to the king, ultimately saving her people. The holiday of Purim, a joyous and raucous celebration, commemorates this deliverance. The persistence of the tomb's association with these figures is a testament to the deep and enduring Jewish presence in Iran, a community that traces its roots back to the Babylonian exile in the 6th century BC and possibly even earlier. For these communities, the tomb is not merely a historical curiosity. It is a sacred space, a place of prayer and pilgrimage that confirms their ancient and legitimate place in the Persian world. However, the historical accuracy of the site is a subject of thoughtful scholarly debate, and exploring these different perspectives enriches our understanding rather than diminishing the tomb's significance. The primary challenge is that the Book of Esther itself is a complex text, considered by many historians to be a novella or a work of historical fiction written centuries after the events it describes, designed to explain the origins of the Purim festival. There is no independent archaeological or historical evidence from the Achaemenid period that confirms the existence of a Queen Esther or a Vizier Haman. Furthermore, some historians and linguists point to architectural and literary clues that suggest the current structure likely dates from the Mongol Ilkhanid period in the 13th or 14th century, though it may stand on a much older site. They propose that the figures buried here could be a different Esther and Mordecai, perhaps a beloved Jewish queen from the Sasanian era, or other important local Jewish leaders whose names and stories were conflated over time with the biblical legends. Yet, to focus solely on the debate over historical verification is to miss the profound cultural and social meaning of the tomb. For centuries, throughout the various dynasties that have ruled Iran, from the Sasanians to the Safavids to the Qajars, this site has been recognized and protected. There are accounts from medieval Jewish travelers who documented their visits, and even under Islamic rule, the tomb was often granted a special status. This long-standing protection speaks to a remarkable history of coexistence. It represents a thread of tolerance within Persian culture, an acknowledgement of the Jewish community as a people of the book with a rightful place in the social fabric. The tomb's very survival through centuries of change is a monument to this complex relationship, one that has known periods of peace and prosperity alongside times of tension. It stands as a physical rebuttal to any simplistic narrative of perpetual conflict, showing that Jewish life in Persia was not just a temporary exile but a deep-rooted and enduring reality. The interior of the tomb reflects this living tradition. The main chamber houses two large carved wooden cenotaphs covered with Hebrew inscriptions and intricate cloth coverings. The atmosphere is one of quiet devotion. For the Jewish community of Iran, which has persisted for over 2 millennia, this site is a cornerstone of their identity. It is a place where they can connect with a foundational story of their resilience. The narrative of Esther is ultimately one of a minority community navigating the corridors of power, using wisdom and courage to secure its future. The continued veneration of the tomb, especially through the profound political changes of the 20th and 21st centuries, is a powerful act of cultural preservation. It is a declaration that this community, though much diminished in numbers in recent decades, remains an inseparable part of Iran's history. Ultimately, the tomb of Esther and Mordecai is far more than a potential archaeological site. It is a palimpsest of memory. Whether it holds the bones of the biblical queen or not is, in a way, secondary to the power of the story it embodies. It is a monument to the idea of survival against the odds, a theme as relevant today as it was in antiquity. It connects the grandeur of the ancient Persian Empire to the lived experience of one of the world's oldest Jewish communities. In its quiet brick walls, we find a narrative of diaspora, adaptation, and faith that has been written and rewritten for over 2,000 years. It reminds us that history is not just about kings and conquests recorded in stone, but also about the enduring legacies of communities who find ways to remember, to endure, and to call a foreign land their home. Our journey now takes us far beyond the formal borders of the Persian Empire, to a discovery that perfectly illustrates how its cultural influence could not be contained by maps or military outposts. In 1949, near the town of Panajurist in modern Bulgaria, 3 brothers digging for clay stumbled upon a find that would rewrite their understanding of the ancient world. What they uncovered was not a single object but an entire golden service, a breathtaking hoard of intricately crafted vessels now known as the Oxus Treasure. While this magnificent collection is definitively Thracian, commissioned for a local king of the powerful Odrysian tribe around the 4th century BC, one object in particular tells a story of cross-cultural connection that spans continents, a stunning gold goblet. This vessel, with its elegant shape and exquisite decoration, is a masterpiece in its own right, but to a trained eye, it speaks a familiar artistic language, the language of the Achaemenid Persian court. The connection is not superficial, it is embedded in the very design and technique of the goblet. The most striking Persian feature is the use of the protome, the forepart of an animal, as a central decorative element. In this case, the body of the goblet is adorned with a series of exquisite appliques featuring the heads of African warriors, their features rendered with remarkable detail. While the subject matter is distinctly African, a nod to Thrace's own trade networks, the artistic concept of using animal and human protomes as ornamentation is a hallmark of Achaemenid luxury goods, as we saw with the Rhytons from Persepolis. Furthermore, the craftsmanship itself points eastward. The Thracian artisans employed sophisticated techniques like repoussé, where the design is hammered into the gold from the reverse side to create a raised relief, and meticulous granulation, the fusing of tiny gold beads to create texture and pattern. These were not simple, local skills, they were the advanced metalworking technologies of the Persian Empire, technologies that had been perfected in royal workshops and whose secrets were highly prized. The million-dollar question, then, is how did this distinctly Persian artistic DNA find its way into the hands of a Thracian goldsmith, hundreds of miles from the heart of the empire? The answer lies in the complex web of interaction that existed beyond outright conquest. Thrace and Persia were not strangers, they were neighbors with a long and complicated history. The Achaemenid kings, particularly Darius I and Xerxes I, had launched major military campaigns through Thrace on their way to confront the Greeks. While these incursions did not lead to permanent Persian annexation, they established a lasting contact. Persian armies did not travel alone. They were followed by diplomats, administrators, and merchants. It is highly plausible that as a gesture of diplomacy or as payment for safe passage, Persian officials presented Thracian chieftains with gifts of magnificent gold and silverware, actual Persian-made rhytons, bowls, and file. These objects would have been instantly recognized as supreme symbols of power and wealth, becoming the most coveted items in a chieftain's treasury. The local Thracian elite, seeing these dazzling imports, would naturally have desired objects in a similar style but tailored to their own tastes and cultural symbols. This is where the panegyrist goblet becomes such a fascinating case study in artistic adaptation. A Thracian king likely commissioned a local workshop, perhaps even employing a master goldsmith who had traveled and learned Persian techniques to create a ceremonial drinking set. The artisan would have been inspired by the Persian prototypes, the use of protomes, the intricate granulation, the overall opulence, but he would have infused the work with local iconography that resonated with his patron. The African heads on the goblet might reflect Thracian mercenary contacts or trade routes, while other vessels in the treasure feature distinctly Greek mythological scenes, showing the Thracians were operating at a cultural crossroads. The result is not a cheap imitation, but a sophisticated synthesis, a hybrid object that uses the international language of Achaemenid power to express a uniquely Thracian identity. This goblet, therefore, is not evidence of Persian domination over Thrace, but rather of Persian influence, a testament to the fact that artistic styles, like ideas, can travel freely along the routes of trade and diplomacy, evolving and adapting to new contexts. It shows us that the empire's greatest export may not have been its armies, but its aesthetic, a visual vocabulary of luxury that was eagerly adopted and reinterpreted by powerful neighbors seeking to position themselves within a wider, interconnected world. Leaving behind the golden treasures of Thrace, we now journey to a stark and windswept mountain pass in modern-day Iraqi Kurdistan, a place that witnessed a pivotal moment of crisis and triumph for the later Persian Empire. Here, overlooking a strategic roadway, stand the crumbling remains of a stone tower, and covering its surfaces is one of the most important historical documents to survive from the Sasanian era, the Persian Inscription of King Narseh. Unlike the grand reliefs of his predecessors, which often depicted idealized scenes of royal power, Narseh's monument is a text-heavy proclamation, a meticulous justification of his claim to the throne carved directly into the landscape of the conflict that secured it. This is not the confident boasting of an unchallenged ruler, but the detailed legal and political argument of a man who had to fight a civil war to claim his birthright and who wanted the entire world and posterity to understand his version of events. The inscription itself is a monumental feat of record-keeping. It is bilingual, written in two closely related languages, Middle Persian and Parthian. This choice was profoundly strategic. The Sasanian Empire, while centered on the Persis region, was a multi-ethnic state that included a powerful Parthian aristocratic class, descendants of the previous ruling dynasty. By issuing his declaration in both languages, Narseh was speaking directly to the two most important power blocks within his kingdom. He was assuring the Parthian nobles that their status and language were still respected, while simultaneously asserting the primacy of the Persian ruling house. The text is incredibly long and detailed, a sprawling narrative that names names, lists allies, and recounts the sequence of events that led to his victory. It functions as a kind of official white paper or a royal press release, frozen in stone for eternity. The very act of creating such a lengthy, bilingual inscription demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of statecraft and propaganda, an effort to build a consensus and legitimize a rule that had been violently contested. The historical context for this inscription is a dramatic family saga of betrayal and ambition. Narseh was the son of the great founder of the Sasanian dynasty, Shapur I. According to the traditional line of succession, he should have become king after his elder brother, Bahram I. However, upon Bahram's death, the throne did not pass to Narseh, but instead to Bahram's son, Bahram II. The reasons for this sidestepping are murky, likely involving court intrigues and the influence of the powerful Zoroastrian high priest Kartir. Narseh, who was serving as the governor of the important province of Armenia, seemed to accept this situation for a time. But when Bahram II died, the situation exploded. The throne passed to Bahram II's son, Bahram III, but his reign was shockingly short, a mere 4 months. A faction of the nobility, seemingly dissatisfied with the young and inexperienced king, revolted and invited Narseh to challenge his grandnephew for the crown. The Pekuli Tower marks the very spot where Narseh, marching from Armenia, was met by these rebel nobles and their armies, who pledged their allegiance to him before the final, decisive confrontation. This is where the inscription becomes our primary source, providing a vivid, first-hand account of a civil war. Narseh's text paints a picture of a kingdom in turmoil under the brief rule of Bahram III. He describes how the noble families and the various regional governors, the powerful Wuzurgan, grew disillusioned and saw in Narseh, the experienced son of Shapur, the only leader who could restore stability and rightful order. The inscription lists these allies, meticulously naming the great houses of Persia and Parthia that supported him. This was not just a roll call of the victorious, it was a public record of political allegiances, a warning to future would-be rebels and a reward to those who had backed the winning side. Narseh portrays himself not as a usurper, but as a liberator, answering the call of the people to restore the dignity of the throne that had been wrongly diverted from its proper path. He frames his actions as a necessary correction to a dynastic mistake, a restoration of justice according to the principles of Kehvarina, the divine royal glory that was meant to bless the legitimate ruler. For historians, the Pekuli inscription is an invaluable treasure. It provides a detailed list of the administrative divisions of the early Sasanian Empire and the titles of its officials, giving us a precise snapshot of the imperial bureaucracy at a critical moment in the 3rd century. It helps clarify the complex and often poorly documented relationships between the Persian kings and the semi-independent vassal kingdoms and noble families that formed the backbone of the state. Most importantly, it offers a counter-narrative to the official histories that would have been written by the victors of the previous regime. Without this inscription, the brief reign of Bahram III and the civil war that overthrew him might have been lost to history, a mere footnote. Instead, Narseh's words, carved with such care into the mountain tower, give us a ringside seat to the brutal and complex reality of royal succession, reminding us that even the most powerful empires were constantly negotiating their authority with a powerful and restless aristocracy. The tower at Pekuli is more than a monument. It is a courtroom argument, a political manifesto, and a foundational document, all rolled into one, standing as a silent witness to the fact that the path to the Persian throne was often paved with intrigue and secured by the sword. This small, abstract clay object truly earns its poetic nickname, the persistence of memory, precisely because it refuses to yield a single, easy answer, forcing us to confront the vast gaps in our understanding of ancient Persian daily life. To move beyond mere speculation, let's bring in some expert voices, imagining a round-table discussion with modern specialists who have spent their careers trying to decipher such enigmatic finds. Each one approaches the artifact with a different set of questions, and their competing interpretations paint a far richer picture than any single explanation ever could. First, we might hear from a specialist in ancient religion and symbolism, Dr. Anahita Vaziri. She would likely argue for a ritual or talismanic purpose. Look at the form, she might say, holding a 3D printed replica. Its non-representational nature is key. It doesn't mimic anything from the observable world, which suggests it represents an abstract concept, a prayer given physical form. Perhaps it's a symbol of interconnectedness, a map of a spiritual cosmos, or a charm meant to channel protective energies. In a pre-literate society, or one where literacy was limited to scribes and priests, objects like this could have served as powerful mnemonic devices for complex beliefs. It might have been used in household shrines, carried during personal meditations, or even placed in foundation deposits for a new home to bless it. The fact that it shows no signs of heavy wear supports this. It wasn't a tool for rough labor, but an object handled with care for a specific, sacred purpose. Next, a household archaeologist, Dr. Cyrus Cylinder, would offer a counterpoint grounded in the rhythms of daily life. While I respect the ritual interpretation, he might begin, we must be cautious not to see mystery where there may be mundane utility. My work focuses on the material culture of ordinary homes, the pots, the loom weights, the cooking implements. This object's size and texture are consistent with many domestic tools. I lean towards the theory that it was a specialized loom weight for a particular type of weaving, perhaps for creating intricate patterns. The irregular shape could have provided a unique tension. Alternatively, consider it as a stamp. Imagine pressing this into a lump of fresh clay to mark it as yours, or into a ball of dough to create decorated bread for a special occasion. These are not glamorous functions, but they are the very stuff of life. The magic of this object might simply be the magic of a family's daily bread. Then an archaeometallurgist, Professor Farhad Rostami, could introduce a more technical perspective. My colleagues make compelling cases, but I'd like us to consider an industrial application he might propose. We know the Persians were master metalworkers. This object's fired clay composition is interesting. Could it have been part of a lost wax casting process? Perhaps it was a core placed inside a wax model to create a hollow space in a final bronze object. Its odd shape would then be a negative space for a specific tool or weapon component. Or consider it as a crucible fragment or a tire fragment, a part of a clay pipe that delivered air to a furnace. The heat-resistant qualities of the clay would be paramount. If it broke off from a larger industrial tool, its current mysterious form is just a fraction of its original, understandable function. We often find broken pieces of technology and mistake them for whole objects. Weighing these theories, a senior historian, Dr. Layla Shirazi, might synthesize the debate. The beauty of this artifact, she could reflect, is that all these interpretations could be correct depending on the context we've lost. It might have started its life as a practical tool, a loom weight, and through generations acquired a ritual significance, becoming a family heirloom with protective powers. Or vice versa, a ritual object, its original meaning forgotten, could have been repurposed for a domestic chore. This is the challenge of archaeology. We are trying to reconstruct a full, vibrant symphony from a handful of surviving notes. The persistence of memory reminds us that the past is not a single story but a tapestry of countless individual lives, each with their own practical needs, spiritual beliefs, and creative impulses. Its true function may remain elusive, but its value is undeniable. It is a perfect symbol for the humility we must bring to the past, acknowledging that some whispers from antiquity are meant to be felt more than fully understood. The endurance of this simple stone structure is a story in itself, a chronicle of respect that transcends empires and religions. Following the Arab-Muslim conquests of the 7th century, which brought a new faith and a new political order to Persia, one might have expected the tomb of a pre-Islamic king to be demolished or forgotten. Yet it survived largely intact. A key reason lies in a remarkable act of historical reinterpretation. Local tradition began to identify the tomb not as the resting place of Cyrus, but as that of Solomon's mother. This clever association, linking the site to a revered prophet in the Quran, granted it a sacred status within the Islamic world, protecting it from the destruction that befell many other symbols of the pre-Islamic past. For centuries, it was cared for as a holy site, a powerful example of how cultural memory can adapt to ensure preservation. This legacy of reverence took a dramatic turn in the early 20th century as Iran was forging a modern national identity. Under the Pahlavi dynasty, Cyrus the Great was elevated to the status of a national hero, a symbol of a unified and powerful Iran that predated foreign influences. The tomb of Cyrus became the central icon of this resurgent nationalism. In 1971, the government staged an extravagant event known as the 2500th anniversary of the founding of the Persian Empire, centered at Pasargadae. The world's attention was focused on the tomb, which was floodlit and served as the backdrop for a gathering of international dignitaries. This event was a deliberate political statement, linking the modern monarchy directly to the glory of Cyrus and the Achaemenid Empire, framing the Shah as the legitimate heir to this ancient legacy. With this renewed importance came the urgent need for physical conservation. The tomb had stood for millennia, but it was not invulnerable. Centuries of exposure to wind, rain, and seismic activity had taken their toll. The most significant threat was earthquake damage. A major tremor could easily topple the gabled roof from its high, narrow base. In the 1960s and again in the 2000s, extensive restoration projects were undertaken. These were not attempts to rebuild or beautify the monument, but rather meticulous feats of engineering aimed at stabilizing it against future disasters. The restoration teams, comprising both Iranian and international experts, used advanced techniques. They inserted titanium rods to internally reinforce the stone blocks, a material chosen for its strength and resistance to corrosion. The joints between the massive stones were carefully repointed, and the entire structure was monitored with sensitive instruments to detect even the slightest shift. The philosophy behind this work was one of minimal intervention. The goal was to make the tomb safe without altering its ancient appearance or spirit. Every effort was made to use materials and methods that were reversible, ensuring that future conservators with better technology could undo the work if necessary. This respectful approach stands in stark contrast to some earlier, more heavy-handed restorations of ancient sites. Here, the priority was authenticity, to preserve the tomb as Cyrus's contemporaries would have recognized it, not to create a modern replica. The work was a delicate dance between honoring the past and securing it for the future, a testament to the value placed on this tangible link to Iran's origins. Today, the tomb's symbolic power is more complex than ever. After the Islamic Revolution of 1979, the new government initially downplayed pre-Islamic history, viewing it as a symbol of the deposed monarchy. For a time, the site was neglected, yet the tomb's profound cultural resonance proved indestructible. Over time, it has been reclaimed as a national symbol for all Iranians, regardless of political or religious affiliation. It represents an enduring Persian identity that stretches back to the dawn of civilization, a source of pride and continuity. It is a place of pilgrimage for Iranians from all walks of life who come to stand in the shadow of the man who founded their nation. The empty chamber and the silent, enduring stones continue to speak, not of a forgotten king, but of a legacy that has weathered conquest, revolution, and the passage of centuries, reminding every visitor of the deep, unbroken roots of a remarkable civilization. The story of the Behistun Inscription is not complete without the equally epic tale of its decipherment, a 19th-century intellectual adventure that rivaled the physical daring of the king who commissioned it. For over 2 millennia, the massive tableau and its trilingual text stared down from the cliff face, a magnificent proclamation whose message was utterly lost to the world. The ancient languages of the Near East, Akkadian, Elamite, Old Persian, had fallen silent, their cuneiform scripts reduced to meaningless patterns of wedges. The inscription was a locked door, and the key lay in the perilous task of reaching it and the brilliant, painstaking work of cracking its code. This task fell to a man whose life seems drawn from an adventure novel, Henry Creswick Rawlinson, a British Army officer, diplomat, and extraordinary linguist. Rawlinson first encountered the Behistun Cliff in the 1830s while serving as a military advisor to the Persian army. He was immediately captivated by the challenge it presented. The sculpture was carved on a specially prepared, smoothed section of the rock, which was then undercut at the base to prevent easy access. This made the inscription visible from the ground but almost impossible to reach. Undeterred, Rawlinson embarked on a series of incredibly dangerous ascents over several years, a feat that required not only immense courage but also a cool head for engineering. He and his local assistants used ladders, ropes, and even wedged wooden beams into cracks in the rock to create makeshift scaffolding. At one point, he reportedly had to swing across a chasm on a rope to reach a crucial section of the text. He dangled precariously hundreds of feet above the ground, his notebook in hand, meticulously tracing the strange characters onto paper. For the highest portions, he trained a young Kurdish boy to climb the cliff and take papier-mâché squeezes, pressing wet paper into the inscriptions to create a perfect mold that could be safely lowered to the ground. Every step was a gamble with his life, all in the pursuit of a script no one could read. Back on solid ground, Rawlinson faced an intellectual puzzle as daunting as the physical climb. He had copies of the same text in 3 different languages. His breakthrough strategy was a stroke of genius. He would start with the simplest of the 3 scripts. The first panel contained a script with relatively few distinct characters, suggesting it was alphabetic or syllabic, unlike the others which had hundreds of signs, indicating a more complex logosyllabic system. He correctly deduced that this was Old Persian, the language of the empire's rulers, but where to begin? He suspected, as other scholars had, that the repetitive patterns in the text likely contained royal names and titles, a common feature of monumental inscriptions. He focused on a particularly prominent group of signs that appeared frequently, guessing that this might be the name of the great king himself, Darius. Using known king lists from later Greek and Persian sources, he began to assign phonetic values to the cuneiform wedges. It was a monumental task of trial and error, a linguistic crossword puzzle on a global scale. As Rawlinson slowly built his understanding of the Old Persian script, he could then use it as a Rosetta Stone to attack the other 2 versions. The second script, which we now know as Elamite, proved difficult, but the third, Babylonian, became the real gateway. Babylonian was a dialect of Akkadian, the lingua franca of the ancient Near East for centuries. Once Rawlinson could read the Babylonian text, he realized he held the key to a lost library. The language of the Babylonians was used not just at Behistun but on thousands of clay tablets lying buried in the mounds of Mesopotamia. His work, combined with the efforts of other brilliant linguists like Edward Hincks, who made key contributions to understanding the script's complexities, unleashed a flood of knowledge. Suddenly, the stories on these tablets could be read, the Epic of Gilgamesh with its tale of a quest for immortality, the detailed law code of Hammurabi, one of the oldest legal documents in the world, and the mundane business records that revealed the day-to-day workings of ancient society. The decipherment of the Behistun inscription was arguably one of the greatest intellectual achievements of the 19th century. It did more than just tell us what Darius wanted to say about his own reign. It gave voice to an entire civilization that had been mute for 2,000 years. Rawlinson's daring climbs and diligent scholarship didn't just solve a single mystery. They opened a door to the ancient world, allowing us to hear the stories, laws, and letters of the Mesopotamians in their own words. The cliff face that Darius had used to proclaim his power to his contemporaries became, centuries later, the very instrument that would proclaim the lost history of his world to ours. And yet, the story of the Oxus Treasure is as much about its dramatic rescue as it is about its ancient creation. The moment it was unearthed from its hiding place along the riverbank, this priceless collection entered a new chapter of peril, a frantic race against time and human greed that would see it scattered across Central Asia before being miraculously reunited. The initial discovery by local merchants was not the end of the adventure, but the beginning of a chaotic and often heartbreaking saga. After finding the hoard, the merchants were reportedly set upon by bandits, their newfound wealth making them targets. In the ensuing struggle, the treasure was divided, with some pieces stolen and others lost or sold off piecemeal to different buyers in the region's bustling markets. For a time, it seemed this magnificent collection, which had survived intact for over 2 millennia, would be broken up forever, its individual pieces melting back into obscurity or, worse, being melted down for the sheer value of their precious metal. This is where the story takes a turn worthy of a Hollywood script, with the entrance of a pivotal and somewhat unlikely hero, Captain F.C. Burton, a British political officer stationed in the region. Burton learned of the treasure's plight, hearing tales of ancient gold objects being offered for sale in the bazaars of Rawalpindi and Peshawar. He recognized their immense historical significance immediately. With great determination and at considerable personal risk, Burton intervened. The most common account describes him encountering a group of merchants who still possessed a significant portion of the hoard but were in dire straits, perhaps held captive or threatened. Burton reportedly paid them a sum of money, securing the remaining artifacts and arranging for their safe transport out of the volatile region. His actions were not those of a treasure hunter, but of a preserver, a man who understood that these objects were far more valuable as historical evidence than as mere bullion. He single-handedly saved the core of the Oxus Treasure from almost certain destruction, but the journey was far from over. The treasure next came into the possession of one of the most influential figures in the history of the British Museum, Sir Augustus Wollaston Franks. Franks was not just a curator, he was a voracious collector and a visionary who understood that the museum's role was to preserve the entire scope of human history. He acquired the collection from Burton and other sources in a series of transactions between 1877 and 1881, using his own funds and later reimbursing himself from the museum's budget. Franks then undertook the Herculean task of reassembling the puzzle. He tracked down individual pieces that had already been sold off separately, purchasing them from private dealers and other collectors, tirelessly working to bring the scattered family of objects back together. His keen eye and scholarly mind allowed him to recognize fragments that belonged together, painstakingly restoring bent armlets and matching broken pieces. His greatest contribution, however, was his recognition of the treasure's true identity and significance. At the time, the world's understanding of Achaemenid Persian art was still in its infancy, based primarily on the monumental sculptures at Persepolis. The Oxus Treasure provided the first comprehensive look at the portable luxury arts of the empire, the goldsmithing, the personal adornments, the objects of daily ritual and elite life. Franks studied the styles, the techniques, and the motifs, correctly attributing the hoard to the Achaemenid period and publishing his findings, thereby establishing its foundational importance for the study of ancient Persia. He didn't just store the treasure away, he curated it, studied it, and presented it to the world, transforming it from a collection of curiosities into a scholarly resource of unparalleled value. When he eventually bequeathed his entire personal collection, including the Oxus Treasure, to the British Museum, he ensured its preservation and accessibility for generations to come. The legacy of this tumultuous journey is a complex one, sitting at the heart of ongoing debates about cultural heritage and museum ownership. The fact that one of the most important collections of Persian antiquity resides in London, rather than in a museum in Tajikistan or Iran, is a pointed reminder of the colonial-era currents that shaped the modern museum landscape. The circumstances of its acquisition, while heroic in the context of saving the treasure from destruction, were part of a broader pattern of objects flowing from their lands of origin to Western institutions. This reality invites important questions about where such artifacts rightfully belong and who should be the primary storytellers of their history. Yet, it is also undeniable that without the intervention of individuals like Captain Burton and the dedication of scholars like Sir Augustus Wollaston-Franks, the Oxus treasure might have been lost to the world entirely, its golden whispers silenced forever in the melting pots of the 19th century. Its presence in the British Museum today allows millions of visitors to stand in awe before these masterpieces, to see the griffin armlets and the golden chariot, and to connect directly with the dazzling material world of the Persian Empire, a world that was very nearly lost not to the sands of time, but to the tumultuous hands of its rediscoverers. To bring our journey full circle, we must return one final time to that unassuming clay cylinder with which we began, for the story of Cyrus's proclamation is far from over. Its modern life is a powerful testament to how ancient artifacts are never truly dead. They are constantly being rediscovered, reinterpreted, and repurposed to speak to the concerns of the present day. Long after its translation, the cylinder evolved from a fascinating archaeological find into a potent international symbol, a process that began most dramatically in the 1970s. The last Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, in his drive to legitimize his monarchy by connecting it to Persia's pre-Islamic glory, seized upon the cylinder as the ultimate proof of Iran's historic contribution to civilization. He presented it as the world's first declaration of human rights, a direct precursor to the ideals enshrined in the United Nations Charter. In 1971, during the lavish celebrations for the 2500th anniversary of the Persian Empire, the Shah's government gifted the United Nations with a full-scale replica of the cylinder, where it remains on display to this day. This act consciously framed modern Iran under the Pahlavi dynasty as the heir to Cyrus's enlightened legacy, a nation founded on principles of tolerance and justice. This interpretation, however, has not gone unchallenged. Many historians and archaeologists have raised important and necessary critiques, urging caution against viewing the cylinder through a strictly modern lens. They argue that applying a 20th century concept like human rights to a text from the 6th century BC is an anachronism, a projection of our own values onto a vastly different historical context. The scholars point out that Cyrus was not a democratic ruler establishing a bill of rights for individual citizens. He was an absolute monarch operating within a system of divine kingship. His policy of tolerance, while undoubtedly enlightened for its time, was also a brilliant and pragmatic strategy for governing a massive, multi-ethnic empire. By allowing subject peoples to worship their own gods and maintain their local customs, he minimized rebellion and ensured a steady flow of tribute and loyalty to the Persian crown. Freeing the Jewish captives in Babylon was a magnanimous act, but it also created a grateful and strategically located client community in Judah, effectively turning Jerusalem into a loyal Persian outpost on the volatile frontier with Egypt. From this perspective, the cylinder is less about universal human dignity and more about effective imperial administration, a masterclass in realpolitik disguised as piety. The debate between these two viewpoints, the cylinder as a timeless moral charter versus the cylinder as a sophisticated political document, is not a simple matter of one side being right and the other wrong. Instead, it reveals the dynamic relationship between the past and the present. The actual text of the cylinder sits in the middle, containing elements that support both interpretations. Cyrus's praise of the Babylonian god Marduk and his restoration of displaced peoples are facts, but the modern emphasis on human rights is a selective reading that highlights certain aspects of the text while downplaying others, such as its clear focus on legitimizing Cyrus's own rule and his reliance on divine sanction. This process of selective emphasis is inevitable. Every generation looks to the past to find its own reflection, to draw lessons and forge identities. The cylinder's power lies in its remarkable flexibility. Its message of benevolent rule and cultural respect is broad enough to inspire a modern human rights movement, even if that was not its original explicit intent. This very flexibility has ensured the cylinder's continued relevance, even after the Iranian Revolution of 1979 sought to erase the Shah's nationalist narrative. The Islamic Republic, which initially rejected the pre-Islamic past as a symbol of the despised monarchy, has itself paradoxically embraced the Cyrus Cylinder as a symbol of Iranian national pride and independence. It is displayed with great prominence in Iran's National Museum, a cherished artifact of the nation's enduring identity. The cylinder, in a sense, has transcended politics. It is too powerful a symbol to be owned by any single faction. It speaks to a deep, abiding human desire for just governance and freedom from oppression, ideals that resonate across centuries and political systems. Its journey from a foundation deposit in the mud of Babylon to an icon in the halls of the United Nations is a remarkable story in itself, proving that the most enduring legacy of an artifact is not necessarily what its creator intended, but the hope and meaning that successive generations discover within it. The Cyrus Cylinder is a bridge connecting an ancient king's pragmatic wisdom with humanity's timeless aspirations. From the philosophical power of the Cyrus Cylinder to the everyday mystery of an abstract clay object, our journey through these 30 artifacts has revealed ancient Persia not as a monolithic empire, but as a breathtaking tapestry of cultures, ideas, and human experiences. We have held in our mind's eye objects that span the entire spectrum of civilization, from the monumental declarations of kings carved into cliff faces to the humble tools of a salt miner preserved by a quirk of nature. Each piece, whether crafted from solid gold or simple clay, has added a unique thread to this rich narrative, proving that history is written not only in the victories of emperors but also in the quiet persistence of ordinary life. The grand reliefs of the Apadana showed us the empire's idealized vision of itself orderly, diverse, and powerful, while the Persepolis fortification tablets revealed the intricate bureaucracy required to make that vision a reality. We've seen how Persian art and influence traveled thousands of miles, turning up in a frozen Siberian tomb and on a Thracian king's goblet, demonstrating a connected ancient world that rivals our own globalization. What emerges from this collection is a picture of a civilization of profound sophistication and surprising nuance. The Persians were master administrators, as evidenced by their standardized coinage and detailed records. They were brilliant engineers, capable of building palaces that synthesized the best of conquered cultures and carving inscriptions in impossible locations. And they were visionary leaders who understood that an empire could be held together by respect as well as by force. Yet, for all we have learned, the artifacts have also been powerful reminders of all that remains shrouded in mystery. The silent lion of Hamadan, the debated authenticity of the Ekbatana tablet, and the enigmatic purpose of a coiled clay object, these puzzles keep the past alive and dynamic, inviting us to continue questioning and exploring. They remind us that history is not a closed book but an ongoing conversation between the present and the past. This journey is now yours to continue. We want to hear from you. Which of these 30 artifacts captured your imagination the most? Was it the tangible wealth of the Oxus Treasure, the world-changing key of the Behistun Inscription, or the deeply human story of the Salt Men? Let us know in the comments below which object you would most want to see for yourself and why. Your curiosity is what fuels these explorations into the mysteries of our world. If you enjoyed this deep dive into ancient Persia, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure. We have many more historical mysteries to uncover, from lost cities to enigmatic relics, waiting to share their secrets with you. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. Until next time.